The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy and fate. But what happens when something from beyond the stars arrives, something that can sense danger before it strikes, that refuses the binary choice between light and dark, that believes in a responsibility no Jedi or Sith has ever conceived? The galaxy far, far away was about to learn that some threads, once pulled, unravel everything. Peter Parker's last memory of Earth was vivid. Dr. Octopus had stolen a Stark Industries prototype, some kind of dimensional stabilizer, and was threatening to collapse an entire city block into a quantum singularity. Peter remembered webbing civilians out of the blast radius, remembered the machine's whine reaching a fever pitch, remembered Doc Ock's mechanical arms sparking as Peter desperately tried to shut it down. Then, light. Blue-white light that tasted like copper and sounded like tearing fabric. His spider sense had screamed a warning his brain couldn't process, and then... nothing. Now, consciousness returned in fragments. Cold metal against his back. The hum of machinery that sounded wrong, too smooth, too powerful. Air that smelled recycled and sterile. Peter's eyes snapped open, and his spider sense immediately flared with a low-level buzz of ambient danger. He was in some kind of cargo hold, surrounded by crates marked with symbols he didn't recognize. The walls were pristine white and gunmetal gray, lit by strips of cold lighting that seemed to emanate from the ceiling itself. "Okay," Peter muttered, checking himself over. His suit was intact, thank you, Stark Tech Weave, but his web shooters were blinking red. Low on fluid. Not great. His body felt fine, though. No injuries from whatever had just happened. Not in Queens anymore. Definitely not in Queens. The cargo hold was massive, easily the size of a city block. Through a transparent steel viewport, Peter could see stars. Thousands of them, but arranged in patterns he'd never seen from Earth. No familiar constellations. His stomach dropped as the implication hit him. Oh no. No no no. Please tell me I'm just really far from home and not. A door hissed open at the far end of the hold. Peter's spider sense spiked hard, and he dove behind a crate just as figures in white armor marched through. Stormtroopers, but Peter didn't know that term yet. To him, they were just soldiers in the most impractical armor he'd ever seen, carrying weapons that looked like they belonged in a sci-fi movie. Sector 7 Gamma Sweep, one of them said, voice distorted by a helmet vocoder. Command wants confirmation that the hyperspace anomaly didn't deposit any debris. Debris, another trooper scoffed. We felt that impact. Something solid hit the loading bay. Peter's mind raced. Hyperspace. Loading bay. These guys talked like they were on a spaceship, but the scale of this place. He peeked around the crate and immediately wished he hadn't. Through the viewport, he could see the curve of the vessel's hull extending for what looked like miles. This wasn't a spaceship. This was a flying city. His spider sense suddenly shrieked a warning, and Peter rolled left as a red bolt of energy seared the air where he'd been standing. The crate behind him melted, plastic and metal running like wax. Contact, a stormtrooper shouted. Intruder in cargo hold 7. More energy bolts filled the air, blaster fire, though Peter didn't know the term. He knew enough to not get hit. His spider sense guided him through the barrage as he flipped and twisted, his enhanced reflexes making the troopers look like they were moving in slow motion. Okay, okay. Peter called out, hands raised as he landed in a crouch. Can we just talk about this? I'm really lost, and I'm pretty sure this is all a big misunderstanding. A bolt nearly took his head off. Peter's spider sense guided his dodge before he consciously registered the threat. Or not. Not talking, we're going with shooting, that's cool too. He webbed the nearest trooper's blaster, yanking it from his grip, then shot a web line to the ceiling and swung in a wide arc. The troopers tracked him, but their shots went wide. Peter noted their tactics, military discipline, but slow target tracking. These guys weren't used to fighting someone who could literally sense their shots before they fired. Seriously, guys, I don't want to hurt anyone. Peter webbed two troopers together, then stuck another's feet to the floor. I'm one of the good guys. Or, I was, back where I'm from. Are there good guys here? Please tell me there are good guys here. An alarm began blaring, a sound that made Peter's teeth ache. Red lights flashed along the walls. Through the viewport, he saw smaller ships detaching from the massive vessel's hull, triangular fighters that moved with predatory grace. Intruder alert, a cold, synthetic voice announced over hidden speakers. All units converge on cargo hold 7. Subject is to be taken alive for questioning. Alive. That's good. Peter webbed himself to the ceiling, staying mobile as more troopers poured through the entrance. Alive means they want to talk. I'm great at talking. But his spider sense was building to a crescendo, warning him of something far more dangerous approaching. Something that felt different from the troopers, colder, more focused. More predatory. Peter's enhanced hearing caught it first, footsteps. Measured, deliberate, accompanied by a rhythmic mechanical breathing that shouldn't have been possible. The sound sent a primal chill down his spine, and his spider sense screamed louder than it ever had, louder than facing the Green Goblin, louder than Venom, louder than anything. The cargo hold doors opened again, and a figure stepped through. Tall. Caped. Armored in black that seemed to drink in the light. A helmet with a triangular mouthpiece and massive, expressionless eye lenses. Every trooper in the hold immediately stood at attention. Peter's spider sense was a constant shriek now, a warning that this being represented danger on a level he'd never encountered. Yet the figure hadn't attacked, hadn't even acknowledged him yet. Just stood there, breathing in that horrible mechanical rhythm. Lord Vader, one of the troopers reported, voice shaking slightly. The intruder demonstrates enhanced physical capabilities and an unknown energy signature. He appeared during the hyperspace anomaly 47 minutes ago. The figure, Vader, turned its helmeted head slowly toward Peter's position on the ceiling. Peter felt something then, something that made his spider sense scream and his skin crawl. Like invisible fingers brushing against his mind, probing, searching. Curious, Vader said, his voice a deep mechanical rasp that somehow conveyed vast intelligence and barely restrained violence. You are not force-sensitive, yet you evade blaster fire as if prescient. You wear no armor, yet you demonstrate superhuman capability. What are you? Peter's mouth was dry. Every instinct told him to run, to fight, to web this guy to a wall and figure out escape routes later. But something in that mechanical voice suggested that all three options would end very, very badly. I'm Spider-Man, Peter said, surprised his voice didn't crack. And I have no idea where I am or how I got here, but I promise you, I'm not your enemy. I'm just really, really lost. Vader raised one black-gloved hand, and Peter felt something impossible. The air around him seemed to solidify, gripping him like invisible ropes. He couldn't move. Couldn't even twitch. The force Vader was using, though Peter had no context for what was happening to him. You will come with me, Vader commanded. The Emperor will want to see this anomaly personally. As Peter was pulled inexorably toward the Dark Lord, web shooters useless and body paralyzed, one thought echoed through his mind. Aunt May always said responsibility was about making the right choices. But what happens when you don't even understand the choices? The cargo hold doors closed behind them with a hiss of hydraulics, and somewhere in the depths of the massive Star Destroyer, systems began analyzing the strange energy signature that had appeared with the hyperspace anomaly. Energy that read almost, but not quite, like the Force itself. The galaxy would never be the same. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The interrogation chamber was a study in imperial efficiency, sterile white walls, a single chair equipped with restraints, and medical droids hovering at the periphery like mechanical vultures. Peter sat in the chair, unrestrained for now, while Vader stood motionless near the door like a statue of black armor and malice. His spider sense hadn't stopped screaming since they'd entered the room. Your physiology is human, Vader stated, reviewing a datapad held by a nervous Imperial officer. Yet enhanced beyond natural capability. Your genetic structure contains anomalies our scanners cannot classify. Explain. Peter's hands were shaking slightly, so he gripped the armrests to steady them. Radioactive spider bite. I know how it sounds, but that's the truth. I was just a kid on a school field trip, and, look, can we talk about where I am? That cargo hold didn't look like any spaceship I've ever seen, and those stars outside aren't. You are aboard the Imperial Star Destroyer Devastator, the officer interrupted, then flinched when Vader's helmet turned fractionally toward him. My lord, I merely thought. Leave us, Vader commanded. The officer practically ran from the room. The medical droids retreated to their charging stations. The door sealed with a pneumatic hiss, leaving Peter alone with the most terrifying being he'd ever encountered. Your spider sense, Vader said, using the term Peter had mentioned during the capture. It warns you of danger before it manifests. A useful ability in combat. It's kept me alive, Peter admitted. Usually. Today it's been going haywire ever since I woke up here. Especially around you. Because you sense the dark side of the Force within me. Vader circled the chair slowly, his cape whispering against the floor. Yet you yourself have no connection to the Force. Your prescience operates on a different principle entirely. Fascinating. Peter's scientific mind latched onto the terminology despite his fear. The Force? What is that, some kind of energy field? And what do you mean dark side? Is there a light side too? Vader stopped circling. For a long moment, only that mechanical breathing filled the silence. You truly know nothing of the Force. It wasn't a question. You are not from this galaxy. Peter's stomach dropped. Galaxy? I'm not even in my own, oh God. Oh God, Aunt May. She's going to think I'm dead. My friends, the Avengers, they have no way to find me. I don't even know if there's a way back. Control yourself, Vader said, and there was something almost clinical in his tone. Panic serves no purpose. You will answer my questions, and perhaps we will determine your utility to the Empire. Or your threat level. Peter's spider sense spiked at the implied threat. He took a shaky breath, forcing himself to think like the scientist Uncle Ben and Aunt May had raised. Okay. Okay. You want answers, I want answers. Maybe we can help each other. You said I'm in a different galaxy. The galaxy, Vader corrected. There is only one that matters. The Galactic Empire spans millions of star systems, all united under Emperor Palpatine's rule. You arrived during a hyperspace transit, an impossibility that suggests either advanced technology or force manipulation beyond standard capability. Hyperspace. Peter filed that away. Faster than light travel, probably. I was fighting someone back home who was using experimental tech, dimensional stabilization, quantum field manipulation. Something went wrong. There was this light, and then I was in your cargo hold. Vader stepped closer, and Peter had to fight every instinct not to bolt from the chair. This technology, describe its function in detail. Peter's spider sense tingled a warning that had nothing to do with physical danger. Vader wanted information he could use. But for what? Peter chose his words carefully. It was designed to stabilize dimensional barriers. Theoretical stuff, mostly. The guy who stole it was trying to weaponize it, create localized gravitational anomalies. I was trying to shut it down when it overloaded. And now you are here, beyond your dimensional origin. Vader's helmet tilted slightly. Tell me, Spider-Man, in your world, are there others with your capabilities? Yeah. Lots of them. Some way more powerful than me. Peter met those expressionless eye lenses. Heroes. People who use their powers to protect others. It's kind of our thing. Heroes. Vader's mechanical voice made the words sound like a diagnosis. And you believe yourself to be one of these heroes? I try to be. With great power comes great responsibility, that's what my uncle taught me before he died. I didn't understand it at first, but now. I can't just stand by when people are in danger. I have to help. Noble sentiments. Vader turned away, facing the wall. But sentiment does not survive contact with reality. Your heroism is a luxury afforded by small-scale conflicts. Galactic warfare operates on principles you cannot fathom. Peter's hands tightened on the armrests. Try me. Very well. Vader's voice carried a cold amusement. The Empire maintains order across trillions of sentient beings. This order requires strength, discipline, and the willingness to make difficult choices. Rebellion festers in the Outer Rim, terrorists who would destabilize entire sectors in pursuit of their naive idealism. They hide among civilians, use populated areas as shields, and claim moral superiority while innocent beings die in their operations. So you're saying they're the bad guys, Peter said slowly. I am saying that governance at this scale does not permit childish notions of good and evil. There is order or chaos. Stability or anarchy. The Emperor's vision unified a galaxy that tore itself apart in civil war for decades. The price of that peace is obedience. Peter's spider sense suddenly flared, but not in warning, more like recognition. Something in Vader's words felt familiar, like arguments he'd heard before from people who justified terrible things for the greater good. And the Jedi? Peter asked, taking a shot in the dark based on Vader's earlier comment about the Force. Where do they fit into this order? The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Vader's breathing grew harsher, more labored. The Jedi were traitors who attempted to overthrow the Republic they had sworn to protect. They were destroyed for their treason. I helped destroy them. The way Vader said it, with such absolute conviction and barely contained rage, made Peter's spider sense scream. There was history here, trauma buried under layers of mechanical breathing and black armor. Peter had interviewed enough people in his journalist work to recognize when someone was reciting a rehearsed truth that didn't quite fit their emotions. You were one of them, Peter said quietly. Before. That's why you know so much about the Force. Vader's hand shot out, and Peter felt that invisible grip again, this time around his throat. He couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, suspended half an inch off the chair by sheer willpower made manifest. His spider sense was a constant siren. You know nothing of what I was, Vader hissed. Or what I became. Through the haze of oxygen deprivation, Peter managed to raise his hands in surrender. Vader held him there for 3 more seconds, a demonstration, a warning, then released him. Peter collapsed back into the chair, gasping. Sorry, Peter wheezed. Asking personal questions, bad habit. Journalist training. You are a journalist. Vader's tone shifted to something almost curious. Not merely a warrior. Photographer, actually. For the Daily Bugle. I take pictures of, Peter stopped himself. Took pictures. Past tense. I don't think that job exists anymore. Vader studied him in silence. When he spoke again, his voice carried a different quality, still cold, still dangerous, but almost contemplative. You possess abilities that could be of significant value. Enhanced reflexes, danger sense, unusual strength. The Empire has use for beings with such talents. The Inquisitorius particularly would benefit from your danger sense capability. Inquisitorius? Force-sensitive operatives who hunt the Jedi remnants that escaped destruction. Your ability to sense danger without traditional Force sensitivity would make you an effective hunter. You would be given purpose, resources, and training. Peter's mind raced. This was recruitment. Vader was offering him a place in this empire, a role hunting people who sounded a lot like what he'd been back home, powered individuals trying to do good. His spider sense gave a sharp pulse of warning. And if I say no? Then you remain a prisoner until we determine whether you represent a threat that requires permanent containment. Vader's mechanical breathing filled the pause. Or elimination. Peter's hands were steady now, even as his heart hammered against his ribs. He thought about Uncle Ben's lessons, about responsibility and power. He thought about the desperate hope in every person's face he'd ever saved. He thought about Aunt May telling him that doing the right thing was often the hardest thing. I need time to think about it, Peter said, meeting Vader's gaze as best he could through those expressionless lenses. You have until we reach Coruscant. Vader moved toward the door. That gives you approximately 6 standard hours to consider your future. I suggest you choose wisely, Spider-Man. The Emperor's patience is not infinite. The door opened, and Vader paused. One more thing. The Emperor is a master of the Force beyond any measure. When you stand before him, your danger sense will tell you what your instincts already know. He is the most dangerous being in the galaxy. Do not attempt to fight him. Do not attempt to flee. Cooperation is your only path to survival. Then Vader was gone, leaving Peter alone in the interrogation chamber with 6 hours to make a decision that would determine whether he lived or died. And somewhere deep in Imperial Center, on the planet Coruscant, Emperor Palpatine felt a disturbance in the Force, a strange ripple of possibility that tasted of opportunity and unprecedented chaos. A smile crossed his withered features as he summoned his advisors. There was a new piece on the board, and the Sith Lord intended to use it. The holding cell was surprisingly comfortable, no bars, just an energy field humming across the doorway and a bunk that would have been luxury compared to some of the places Peter had slept during stakeouts. He sat cross-legged on the bunk, web shooters disassembled on the blanket before him, trying to determine if he could synthesize more web fluid with whatever materials this galaxy had available. The problem was that everything here was wrong. The metals had different compositions. He'd analyzed the crate fragments during his brief escape attempt. The polymers were synthetic but built on chemical principles that didn't quite match Earth science. And without access to a proper lab, he was essentially trying to rebuild his web formula from scratch using alien materials. Think, Parker, he muttered, examining the residue in one cartridge. You've built web shooters in high school chemistry labs with borrowed equipment. This is just advanced materials science from a completely different technological paradigm. No big deal. His spider sense gave a gentle pulse, not danger, exactly, but awareness. Someone was approaching. Peter quickly reassembled his web shooters and slipped them back onto his wrists as the energy field dropped and 2 stormtroopers entered, flanking a woman in a crisp gray Imperial uniform. Prisoner transfer, she announced, holding a data pad. You're being moved to more secure containment during the approach to Coruscant. Lord Vader's orders. Peter stood slowly, hands visible. More secure than an energy field I definitely couldn't have escaped from. The woman's expression didn't change, but one of the troopers shifted his grip on his blaster. Peter's spider sense tingled, nervous trigger finger. These guys were scared of him. That was either good or very bad. They escorted him through corridors that seemed to stretch forever, all the same sterile Imperial aesthetic. Peter's photographers I catalogued everything, the blast doors marked with high galactic script he couldn't read, the viewports showing the swirling chaos of hyperspace, the crew members who pressed themselves against walls as the group passed. Everyone here was afraid, of Vader, of the Empire, maybe of Peter himself. His spider sense spiked suddenly, hard. Not from the stormtroopers or the officer, from somewhere else in the ship. Something was wrong, happening right now, somewhere close. Wait, Peter said, stopping. Do you guys hear that? Hear what? The officer demanded. Peter closed his eyes, letting his enhanced senses expand. There, muffled shouts, the distinctive sound of weapons fire, and underneath it all, a rhythmic thumping like someone hitting a control panel in frustration. His spider sense pulled him toward a maintenance corridor to their left. Someone's in trouble. That way. Keep moving, prisoner, one of the troopers ordered, jabbing him with the blaster. Peter's spider sense flared a warning, and he twisted away from the jab, faster than the trooper could track. I'm serious. There's an emergency or an attack or something. The ship shuddered. Red emergency lighting flooded the corridor, and an alarm began wailing. The officer's datapad lit up with urgent alerts. Security breach, Section 12, she read, face paling. Rebel saboteurs have compromised the shield generator control room. All units. Peter was already running. His spider sense guided him through the maze of corridors, the stormtroopers shouting behind him but unable to keep pace. He burst through a blast door that was halfway closed, slid under a cloud of smoke, and found himself in a control room that looked like a war zone. 4 people in nondescript clothing were working frantically at a massive computer terminal, while 2 more stood guard with blaster rifles. They wore no uniforms, no insignia, but they moved with military precision. The guards spun toward Peter, weapons raised. Freeze! Who are you? Where's your uniform? Peter's hands went up automatically. Whoa, whoa. Not Imperial. I'm a prisoner, was a prisoner. Are you guys rebels? Because if you're fighting the Empire, we should probably talk. He's a distraction, one of the guards said. Take him down. His spider sense screamed, and Peter wall crawled to the ceiling before the blaster bolts could connect. The rebels tracked him, but their shots went wide as he scrambled across the ceiling toward them. Wait. I don't want to fight you. Peter webbed one guard's blaster, yanking it away. I just want to know what you're doing. Are you sabotaging the ship? There are thousands of people on board. Imperials, a woman at the terminal spat. They chose their side. Some of them are just doing their jobs. Peter dodged another shot, flipped down behind a console. You can't just kill everyone. We're not killing anyone, you idiot, the woman snapped. We're broadcasting the ship's location to the rebellion. This destroyer is carrying experimental weapons to Coruscant. We're marking it for interception. Peter's mind raced. Rebels trying to stop weapons shipments, that sounded heroic. But broadcasting the location meant a battle, meant the ship would be attacked, meant people would die. His spider sense was building toward something catastrophic. How long until the message transmits? 2 minutes. And nothing stopping it, we've locked out Imperial access. That's when Peter heard it, mechanical breathing echoing down the corridor. His spider sense exploded into white-hot warning. Vader, he whispered. He's coming. The rebels heard it too. Their faces went pale, and the 2 at the terminal worked faster, fingers flying across controls. The guards positioned themselves at the door, but their hands were shaking. We hold here, one of them said, voice cracking slightly. For the rebellion. Peter's photographer instincts kicked in. These weren't hardened soldiers. They were barely older than him, probably younger. Kids playing at war because they believed in something. And in 30 seconds, Vader was going to kill them all. The blast door exploded inward, torn apart by invisible force. Vader strode through the smoke, lightsaber ignited, a blade of pure crimson that hummed with barely contained violence. The guards opened fire immediately. Vader deflected every bolt with casual precision, the blaster fire ricocheting harmlessly into the walls. Your resistance is futile, Vader intoned, advancing. Peter's spider sense was screaming so loud he could barely think. But his body moved on instinct. He dropped from the ceiling between Vader and the rebels, hands spread in desperate placation. Stop. Nobody else has to die. Vader's lightsaber paused inches from Peter's chest. Step aside, Spider-Man. This does not concern you. They're just kids. Look at them. Peter gestured to the terrified rebels. They believe in something, right or wrong. Isn't there a way to stop this without killing them? They are enemies of the Empire. The penalty for sabotage is death. Vader's helmet tilted. You would die to protect terrorists. Peter's mouth was dry, but his voice was steady. I would die to protect anyone if I thought I could save them. That's what heroes do. For a moment, nothing moved. The rebels had stopped working, staring at this insane stranger in red and blue who had put himself between them and Darth Vader. The lightsaber hummed, so close to Peter's chest that he could feel the heat through his suit. Then Vader lowered the blade. You interest me, Spider-Man. The Dark Lord turned to the rebels. You have 10 seconds to surrender before I reconsider my restraint. Surrender, and you will face trial. Resist, and you will die. The rebels looked at each other, then at Peter, then at their terminal. The transmission indicator was at 98%. Sorry, Spider-Man, the woman at the terminal said softly. Some things are worth dying for. She pressed a final button, and the transmission completed. Then everything went wrong. Peter's spider sense detonated into pure agony as alarms shrieked throughout the ship. The terminal exploded in sparks, and Vader's attention snapped to it, but it was too late. The damage was done. What have you transmitted? Vader demanded. The truth, the woman said, smiling despite her terror. The Devastator's route, cargo manifest, and shield frequencies. And something your empire didn't know we had, the location of your hidden listening post in the Lantilles sector. Vader's breathing became harsher. Impossible. That installation is classified beyond standard clearance. Another rebel laughed bitterly. Your empire leaks like a failing hull, Vader. We have operatives everywhere. And now the rebellion knows about 87 Imperial cells we compromised through your own people. Peter's enhanced hearing caught what happened next. Throughout the ship, alerts were going off. Encrypted channels were being purged. Entire communication networks were being severed. And somewhere in the distance, he heard weapons powering up. The Devastator was preparing for combat. You've doomed yourselves, Vader said quietly. And you've doomed your cell networks. Every location you transmitted will be destroyed. Maybe, the woman said. But you'll have to explain to your Emperor how a group of 6 saboteurs compromised an Imperial Star Destroyer's security and broadcast classified intelligence across half the galaxy. I wonder how forgiving he'll be. Vader's hand came up, and the rebels clutched at their throats, lifted off their feet by invisible fingers. Peter moved without thinking. He webbed Vader's arm and yanked, trying to break the concentration. It barely budged the Dark Lord, but it was enough distraction for the force choke to weaken. The rebels dropped, gasping. Don't! Peter shouted. Vader, please, they're beaten. You don't have to. Silence. Vader turned the force on Peter, and suddenly he couldn't move, couldn't breathe, suspended in that terrible invisible grip. You have interfered twice now. There will not be a third time. Through the haze of oxygen deprivation, Peter watched helplessly as Vader's lightsaber came up. The rebels didn't run, didn't beg, they just watched their death approach with the grim acceptance of soldiers who knew the price. Then a voice crackled over the ship's intercom, Lord Vader, report to the bridge immediately. Multiple rebel starfighters have dropped out of hyperspace. We're under attack. Vader's grip released, and Peter collapsed to the deck, heaving for air. The Dark Lord looked at the rebels, then at Peter, then at the smoking terminal. Detain them all, Vader commanded to the stormtroopers flooding into the room. The Spider-Man as well. I will deal with this rebellion personally. As Peter was hauled to his feet, wrists being magnetically bound, he caught the woman's eyes. She mouthed 2 words, thank you. But Peter's spider sense was still screaming, and he realized with growing horror what he'd done. He'd distracted Vader just long enough for the transmission to complete. He'd interfered in something he didn't understand, hadn't stopped to think about consequences, and now people on both sides were going to die because he'd played hero without knowing the game. The rebels were marched away in different directions. Peter was dragged back toward his cell, but his mind was spinning. The Devastator shuddered as turbolaser fire began exchanging with the rebel attack force. Alarms wailed. Crew ran through corridors. And somewhere in the chaos, Peter Parker realized something terrible. He had just helped the rebellion expose Imperial secrets and trigger a major battle, all because he'd acted on instinct instead of thinking about the bigger picture. His uncle's words echoed in his head, with great power comes great responsibility. But what was responsibility in a galaxy at war? How could you save everyone when every action helped one side hurt the other? When trying to stop one death caused 100 more. Peter closed his eyes as the cell door sealed behind him again, listening to the sounds of battle growing closer. He'd been in this galaxy less than a day, and he'd already destroyed more than he'd saved. The battle lasted 3 hours. Peter counted every minute from his cell, his spider sense providing a constant stream of information he didn't want, impacts against the hull, explosions in distant sections, the sudden absences where life had been and then wasn't. Every death registered as a brief spike of warning that came too late, and by the time the rebel fighters retreated into hyperspace, Peter felt like he'd been beaten with a hammer. 47 crew members dead. He didn't know how he knew that number, but his spider sense had felt each one wink out. 47 people who'd woken up that morning expecting to live, who'd had families or dreams or just wanted to get through their shift. Gone because he'd delayed Vader for 30 seconds. The cell door opened without warning. Vader stood in the doorway, his armor scorched in places, cape torn. He said nothing, just gestured for Peter to follow. The stormtrooper escort was gone. It was just the two of them walking through corridors still smoky from internal fires. They ended up in an observation deck, the massive viewport showing the star-streaked tunnel of hyperspace. Vader stood facing it, hands clasped behind his back, mechanical breathing the only sound. The rebel attack disabled our primary sensor array and damaged our hyperdrive motivator, Vader finally said. Repairs will take 6 hours. This delays our arrival at Coruscant, which will displease the Emperor. Peter's throat was raw from smoke inhalation during the battle. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to. You acted without understanding. Vader didn't turn around. The woman you helped save, Kira Saren, is responsible for 17 Imperial deaths prior to today. She orchestrated the bombing of a garrison on Christoph Sis that killed 43 soldiers, most of them conscripts from Outer Rim worlds who joined for steady pay to feed their families. She is a terrorist, Spider-Man. Not a freedom fighter. Peter felt sick. I didn't know. Ignorance does not absolve you of consequences. Vader's reflection in the viewport was a dark specter. You claimed that with great power comes great responsibility. Yet you wielded your power today without accepting responsibility for understanding the conflict you interfered in. I was trying to stop people from dying. And in doing so, you ensured far more would die. Vader finally turned, and even without seeing his face, Peter could feel the weight of his judgment. The intelligence Saren transmitted has already borne fruit. 3 Imperial listening posts have gone dark, destroyed by rebel strike teams who used the information you helped transmit. Estimate, 200 personnel per installation. 600 dead, Spider-Man. Because you believed saving 5 terrorists was worth more than strategic security. Peter's legs felt weak. He grabbed the viewport edge for support. That's not, I didn't know what they were transmitting. I just saw people about to be killed and I. You reacted. Instinct over intellect. Emotion over strategy. Vader moved closer. This is why the Jedi failed. They claimed to serve the greater good, but they could not make the hard choices. They saved individual lives while allowing entire systems to burn. Your heroism operates on the same flawed principle. So what's the alternative? Peter's voice cracked. Let you kill anyone who opposes the Empire. Murder kids because they believe in freedom. There is no freedom in chaos. There is no justice in anarchy. Vader's tone was absolutely certain. The Empire provides order. Those who resist that order prolong suffering and death. The mathematics are simple, eliminate the rebels swiftly, and billions live in peace. Allow them to persist, and trillions suffer in endless war. Peter wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. He was shaking, from exhaustion, from horror, from the crushing weight of impossible choices. That's not how it works back home. You don't fight tyranny by accepting it. You fight it by. Your home is irrelevant. Vader cut him off. You are here now, in a galaxy whose scale and complexity exceed anything you've experienced. Your neighborhood heroics have no place in galactic conflict. You cannot save everyone, Spider-Man. You must choose who lives and who dies. That is the burden of true power. The words hit Peter like physical blows. Because part of him, the part that had counted 47 deaths and felt 600 more on his conscience, knew Vader was right. Not about the Empire, not about tyranny being acceptable, but about the fundamental problem: he couldn't save everyone here. The galaxy was too big, the conflict too entrenched, his power too small. The rebellion you inadvertently aided believes they fight for freedom, Vader continued. But freedom for whom? They sabotage supply lines that feed Outer Rim colonies. They raid Imperial facilities that maintain hyperspace routes. They inspire uprisings that result in brutal crackdowns. Every victory they claim costs innocent lives, lives they justify as necessary sacrifices for their cause. You're trying to make them sound as bad as you are, Peter said quietly. I am trying to make you understand that this conflict has no heroes. Only those who accept the cost of their choices, and those who delude themselves about the blood on their hands. Vader's helmet tilted slightly. The rebels will use you, Spider-Man. They will see your power and your naive morality and weaponize both. And you will help them destroy countless lives while believing you serve justice. Peter straightened, meeting those expressionless lenses. What about you? You keep talking about order and hard choices, but you're the guy who was about to murder 5 people for sabotage. Don't tell me about blood on hands when yours are soaked in it. For a moment, Vader was silent. Then, surprisingly, he nodded. You are correct. I am a weapon, Spider-Man. I serve the Empire's purpose without illusion or excuse. I do not claim heroism or righteousness. I simply act according to the galaxy's needs as I understand them. The Dark Lord turned back to the viewport. The question you must answer is this: will you be a weapon that serves order, or chaos? Before Peter could respond, his spider sense flared, not danger, but something else. A presence approaching, radiating determination and barely controlled fury. The observation deck doors opened, and a woman strode in wearing rebel flight gear, blaster drawn and pointed directly at Vader. Step away from him, she ordered, her voice steady despite the terror Peter could smell on her. Spider-Man, get behind me. I'm getting you out of here. Peter's mind raced. How had a rebel gotten aboard? His spider sense provided the answer. She'd hidden in the damaged sensor array during repairs, used the chaos to infiltrate. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with a rebellion Starbird patch on her shoulder and the kind of desperate courage that got people killed. You are Darth, Vader identified her without turning around. Pilot, Red Squadron. You stayed behind during the retreat. Foolish. Shut up. Dara's blaster didn't waver. I listened to the intercepted transmission. This guy, Spider-Man, he tried to save our operatives. That means he's not one of you. That means I'm getting him out before you turn him into another Inquisitor. Peter's spider sense was screaming now, showing him exactly how this played out. Dara would fire, Vader would deflect the bolt and kill her in 2 seconds, and Peter would watch another person die because of his interference. Don't, Peter said quickly. Dara, right? Don't shoot. He'll kill you. Maybe. But at least you'll have a chance to escape in the confusion. She smiled grimly. That's how the rebellion works. We sacrifice for each other. That's not sacrifice, that's suicide. Peter moved between them, hands raised. Please, just lower the blaster and let's talk about this. There's nothing to talk about. But Dara's weapon lowered slightly. The Empire took my homeworld. Vader personally executed my brother for refusing conscription. I've got nothing to lose and one chance to save someone from becoming what I've spent 3 years fighting against. So either you come with me right now, or I shoot Vader and we all die trying. Vader still hadn't moved, hadn't even reached for his lightsaber. He was watching this play out with what Peter suspected was clinical interest. You offer him freedom, Vader said. But freedom to do what? Return to his universe? You lack the technology. Join the rebellion? You would use his power until he becomes complicit in your atrocities. Flee into the Outer Rim? He would be hunted by both Empire and Rebellion alike. Better than becoming your slave, Dara shot back. Is it? Vader's question hung in the air. Spider-Man values life above all else. The Empire can give him resources to save lives, medical technology, disaster response, protection for vulnerable populations. The Rebellion offers only endless conflict and moral compromise disguised as righteousness. Which serves his principles better? Peter's head was spinning. This was a recruitment pitch, both of them were trying to win him to their side, using arguments specifically crafted to appeal to his values. And the terrifying thing was that both made sense. The Empire had resources, technology, reach. The Rebellion had freedom, hope, resistance to tyranny. But both had blood on their hands. Both would use him. Both would make him complicit in things that would haunt him. I need time, Peter said. I need to see more of this galaxy before I choose anything. I need to understand what I'd be choosing. You don't have time, Dara insisted. In a few hours, Vader delivers you to the Emperor. And once Palpatine gets his claws into you, you'll never escape. I've seen what he does to Force sensitives he recruits. I won't let that happen to you. The Emperor seeks only to understand the anomaly, Vader said. Your danger sense fascinates him. He wishes to determine if it can be replicated or enhanced. You would be studied, not harmed. Unless you prove hostile. Peter's spider sense pulsed with a warning, Vader was lying. Not completely, the Emperor did want to study him. But not harmed was a relative term, and whatever Palpatine had planned would definitely involve harm of some kind. Dara seemed to sense Peter's hesitation. You don't trust him. Good. That means you're smart. Now trust me instead, the Rebellion will give you real choices. We fight because we believe beings should determine their own fates, not have order imposed by tyrants. Isn't that what your great responsibility means? Giving people the freedom to choose. Freedom to choose chaos, Vader countered. Freedom to choose suffering. The Rebellion's rhetoric sounds noble until you watch entire systems collapse into civil war because they liberated them from imperial stability. Stop. Peter's shout surprised everyone, including himself. Just stop. Both of you. You're not trying to help me, you're trying to use me. You both see a useful tool and you're fighting over who gets to wield it. Well, I'm not a tool. I'm a person. And I'm not choosing either of you until I see for myself what this galaxy is actually like. Dara's expression softened. Then come with me. Let me show you what the Empire's done to the Outer Rim. Let me show you why we fight. If you leave this ship with her, you become an enemy of the Empire, Vader stated flatly. I will hunt you. The Inquisitors will hunt you. And when you are captured, and you will be captured, the Emperor's mercy will not be available. Your choice will be death or service, nothing more. Peter looked between them, the Dark Lord of the Sith and the rebel pilot, both offering him futures that would destroy him in different ways. His spider sense showed him both paths, Vader's lead to power and control but also complicity in atrocities. Dara's lead to freedom and purpose but also endless war and impossible moral choices. Neither path let him be Spider-Man. Neither path let him save everyone. I'm sorry, Peter said to Dara. But I can't go with you. Her face fell. Please. You don't understand what you're. I understand that if I leave with you, Vader hunts me and I never get a chance to learn enough about this galaxy to actually help anyone. But I'm also not accepting his offer. Peter turned to Vader. I won't join your empire. I won't hunt Jedi or Force sensitives or whoever else you want eliminated. But I'll meet your Emperor. I'll answer his questions. And then I'll make my own choice about what happens next. Vader's breathing was the only sound for several long seconds. Acceptable, he finally said. Lower your weapon, pilot. You are permitted to leave. Dara stared. What? You infiltrated an Imperial Star Destroyer alone, evaded detection, and attempted to rescue a stranger at significant personal risk. Such dedication deserves acknowledgement. Vader's hand moved minutely, and the observation deck door opened. Go. Tell your rebellion that Spider-Man has chosen to hear all sides before committing to their doomed cause. It was a calculated move, Peter saw it immediately. Vader was letting Dara report back that Peter had refused the rebellion, which would make them cautious about approaching him again. Meanwhile, the Empire looked magnanimous, giving him the illusion of free choice while shepherding him toward Palpatine. But Dara was looking at Peter with something like heartbreak. You're making a mistake. The Emperor is a monster. Whatever you think you're doing, whatever principles you think you're holding on to, he'll twist them. He'll make you into something you'll hate. And by the time you realize it, it'll be too late. Maybe, Peter admitted. But I've got to see for myself. That's the only way I can make a choice I can live with. Dara holstered her blaster slowly, never taking her eyes off Peter. When you need extraction, when you realize I was right, call for the rebellion. We monitor Imperial frequencies. We'll come for you. Just, remember that you had a chance to walk away clean. She backed toward the door, then ran. Peter's spider sense tracked her through the ship, finding her hidden infiltrator pod in the damaged sensor array, feeling her launch into space and jump to hyperspace before the Imperials could scramble fighters. He was alone with Vader again. That was foolish, Vader said. She will report your abilities to the rebellion. They will plan accordingly. Good. Let everyone know what I can do. Maybe then they'll realize I'm not someone they can just use. Peter's voice was harder than he expected. You said I'd have to choose between order and chaos. Fine. But I'm choosing on my terms, after I've seen what both sides really are. And if I don't like either option, I'll make a third choice. There is no third choice in galactic war. Peter met those expressionless lenses one more time. Then I guess I'll just have to prove you wrong. Vader studied him for a long moment, then turned and walked away. We arrive at Coruscant in 5 hours. Prepare yourself, Spider-Man. The Emperor is far more dangerous than you comprehend. Your danger sense will tell you as much. Let us see if your resolve survives the encounter. As the Dark Lord's footsteps faded, Peter collapsed against the viewport, exhausted and terrified and more lost than he'd ever been. He'd refused both sides, bought himself time to think, but at what cost? His spider sense whispered the answer, the cost was yet to come. And it would be higher than anything he'd paid before. The rebel pilot's death happened so fast that Peter's spider sense barely had time to register it. One moment Dara was backing toward the door, blaster holstered, relief beginning to show on her face. The next, Vader's hand had made a subtle twisting motion, and her neck snapped with a sound Peter would never forget. She crumpled to the deck like a puppet with cut strings. No. Peter lunged forward, but his spider sense screamed a warning and he froze as Vader's other hand came up, force holding him in place. She was an enemy combatant, Vader stated, his tone unchanged, clinical. Allowing her to leave would have been strategically unsound. She possessed intelligence regarding your capabilities. That information dies with her. Peter stared at the body, his enhanced vision cataloging details he desperately didn't want to see, the unnatural angle of her head, the way her hand had twitched once before going still, the rebellion starboard patch on her shoulder that would never mean anything to her again. He'd been talking to her 30 seconds ago. She'd been alive, determined, trying to save him. Now she was gone. You said, Peter's voice broke. You said she could leave. You gave your word. I gave permission. I did not guarantee safe passage. Vader released his force grip, and Peter stumbled forward, dropping to his knees beside Dara's body. Consider this a lesson, Spider-Man. In galactic warfare, mercy is a luxury that costs lives. I spared her the fear of knowing death was coming. That is more kindness than most receive. Peter's hands were shaking as he reached out to close Dara's eyes. She'd been so young, maybe his age, maybe younger. She'd had a brother who'd been executed. She'd had a homeworld the Empire had taken. She'd had reasons for fighting, reasons for risking everything to save a stranger. And Vader had murdered her without hesitation. You're a monster, Peter whispered. Yes. Vader's agreement was matter of fact. Monsters are what this galaxy requires. The alternative is well-meaning heroes who prolong suffering with their idealism. Which would you prefer, a clean death for one enemy combatant, or the deaths of hundreds when she reports your capabilities and the rebellion plans operations around exploiting them? Peter stood slowly, his whole body trembling with rage and grief and helplessness. There had to be another way. There's always another way. In your universe, perhaps. Not here. Vader gestured, and stormtroopers entered to remove the body. You asked to see what both sides truly are. This is the Empire, efficient, ruthless, willing to make the hard choices your conscience cannot bear. Remember this moment when you stand before the Emperor. Remember that sentiment has no place in the calculus of power. As Dara's body was carried away, Peter felt something inside him crack. Not break, not yet, but crack. A fissure in his certainty, in his belief that being Spider-Man meant always finding a way to save everyone. He'd failed to save Dara. He'd failed to save the 47 crew members who died in the battle. He'd failed to stop the 600 personnel at the listening posts from dying because of intelligence he'd helped transmit. His great power, his great responsibility, it meant nothing here. He was just one person in a galaxy of trillions, and everything he touched turned to ash. The observation deck will be sealed for the remainder of our journey, Vader informed him. You will remain here under guard. Do not attempt escape. Do not attempt communication with any crew members. When we arrive at Coruscant, you will accompany me directly to the Imperial Palace. Any deviation from these instructions will be considered hostile action. Vader left without waiting for a response. The doors sealed, leaving Peter alone with two stormtroopers who stood at parade rest by the entrance, weapons ready but not aimed. Through the viewport, hyperspace continued its endless blue-white tumble. Peter sank down against the wall, pulled his knees to his chest, and finally let himself cry. 4 hours later, a soft chime indicated they were approaching real space. Peter had spent the time in numb silence, watching hyperspace and trying not to think about Dara's neck snapping, about the 47 crew members, about the 600 at the listening posts. His spider sense had settled into a low background hum of ambient danger. This entire ship was dangerous, this entire galaxy was dangerous. The transition to real space was disorienting, the blue tunnel collapsing into star-streaked reality. And there, filling the viewport, was Coruscant. Peter's breath caught despite everything. The planet was a city. Not a planet with cities, not a planet with one major city, the entire thing was covered in structures that stretched from surface to upper atmosphere. Billions of lights glittered across the surface like a circuit board the size of a world. Massive towers pierced the cloud layer, and streams of traffic flowed between them in organized chaos. Orbital platforms hung in space like steel moons, and everywhere he looked there were ships, thousands of them, from tiny personal craft to vessels that dwarfed the Devastator. It was beautiful and terrible and completely overwhelming. "One planet," Peter murmured. "That's one planet, and there are millions of them in this galaxy. Oh God." His spider sense pulsed gently, not in warning but in recognition. This was the heart of the Empire. This was where decisions were made that affected trillions. This was where Emperor Palpatine ruled from his palace, orchestrating atrocities and maintaining order in equal measure. And Peter was about to meet him. The Devastator descended through Coruscant's atmosphere, joining traffic patterns that made New York rush hour look like a quiet suburban street. Peter watched speeders and transports and passenger ships flow around them like water around a stone. Everything moved with mechanical precision, no accidents, no collisions, just perfect synchronized motion controlled by millions of individual decisions happening simultaneously. They landed at an Imperial facility near what looked like the government district, massive buildings adorned with Imperial symbols, all sharp angles and intimidating architecture. The moment the ship touched down, Vader appeared at the observation deck entrance. "Come." Peter followed, flanked by stormtroopers, through corridors and down ramps until they emerged onto a landing platform. The scale of Coruscant hit him immediately, buildings stretching kilometers into the sky, the roar of traffic overhead, the smell of ozone and recycled air and millions of beings living on top of each other. His spider sense was going haywire trying to process all the potential dangers in a city this size. An Imperial shuttle waited on the platform, sleek and angular. Vader boarded without looking back, and Peter climbed the ramp after him. The interior was austere, black metal seats, viewports showing the cityscape, and absolutely no decoration. "The Emperor is aware of your arrival," Vader said as they lifted off. "He has cleared his afternoon schedule to meet with you personally. This is an extraordinary honor. Respond with appropriate respect." "What happens if I don't?" Peter asked quietly. "Then you discover why even I show him deference." The shuttle climbed above the traffic lanes, giving Peter a better view of Coruscant's upper levels. Wealth lived up here. He could see it in the pristine architecture, the private landing platforms, the gardens suspended impossibly in the air. But his enhanced vision could also see lower, into the canyons between buildings where sunlight never reached, where the structures were older and more decrepit. "There are levels to this city," Peter said, more to himself than Vader. "The higher you go, the richer you are. What's at the bottom? Those who serve no useful function to society." Vader's response was flat. "The dregs. Criminal elements, failed citizens, beings who cannot adapt to civilization. They live in the Undercity and prey on each other. The Empire maintains order on the levels that matter." "You mean you only care about the people with money or power?" "I mean that resources are finite and must be allocated efficiently. You cannot save the underworld, Spider-Man. It has existed for millennia and will exist long after you are gone. Better to focus on maintaining the systems that keep billions in productive, peaceful lives." Peter wanted to argue, but he was too exhausted and too heartsick. His spider sense pulsed a warning, something massive was approaching. Through the viewport, he saw it, a pyramidal building larger than anything else in sight, built on a scale that defied reason. Dark stone, small windows, an aura of menace that made his skin crawl even from kilometers away. The Imperial Palace, Vader identified. Once the Jedi Temple. The Emperor found it appropriate to build his seat of power on the ruins of those who failed to maintain order. The symbolism wasn't subtle. Peter's spider sense was building towards something catastrophic as they approached, not immediate danger, but the promise of danger, the potential for harm so vast his nervous system couldn't fully process it. They landed on a private platform halfway up the palace. The moment the ramp lowered, Peter felt it, a presence that made every hair on his body stand up. His spider sense wasn't screaming, it was howling, a constant wail of warning danger threat run that took all his willpower to ignore. "He's in there," Peter said unnecessarily. "The Emperor. I can feel him. Your danger sense recognizes power when confronted with it." Vader walked down the ramp. "Come. Do not keep him waiting. Peter forced his legs to move. Every step toward the palace entrance was against his instincts, against his spider sense, against every survival mechanism his body possessed. But he'd made his choice, he'd chosen to see for himself, to understand before committing. And that meant facing the most dangerous being in the galaxy. The interior of the palace was all dark stone and crimson accents. Red Imperial guards stood at intervals like statues, their force pikes held at attention. They didn't move as Vader and Peter passed, but Peter's spider sense registered each one as a lethal threat. These weren't ceremonial guards, these were killers trained to eliminate anyone who threatened the Emperor. They walked through corridors that seemed designed to intimidate, all high ceilings and narrow walls that funneled visitors toward a single destination. Peter's spider sense was so loud now that it was almost white noise, his entire body screaming at him to turn around and run. Finally, they reached a door, simple, unadorned, completely unremarkable except for the aura of menace radiating from beyond it. Inside, Vader said, "You will show respect. You will answer questions truthfully. You will not make sudden movements. If you attempt to attack the Emperor, you will die before your hand travels 10 centimeters. Am I understood?" Peter's mouth was too dry to speak. He just nodded. The door opened. The Emperor's private audience chamber was circular, dark, lit by dim red lights that cast everything in shadow. And there, seated in a simple chair at the room's center, was a figure in black robes. An old man, ancient, even, with a face like weathered leather and eyes that glowed with sickly yellow light. He smiled as Peter entered, and that smile was worse than any threat. "Welcome, young Spider-Man," Emperor Palpatine said, his voice a raspy whisper that somehow carried perfectly in the chamber. "I have been most eager to meet you. Please, come closer. I promise, I do not bite." He laughed at his own joke, a sound like dry leaves rustling. Peter's spider sense was screaming so loud he could barely think. But he forced himself to walk forward, to stand before this withered old man who radiated more danger than anything Peter had ever encountered. Palpatine studied him with those terrible yellow eyes, and Peter felt something brush against his mind, not like Vader's intrusive force probe, but subtler, like fingers gently testing the edges of his thoughts. "Fascinating," the Emperor whispered. "You sense me, do you not? Your peculiar gift warns you of danger, and I am danger incarnate. Yet you stand here anyway. Such courage. Or such foolishness. Tell me, child, which is it?" Peter met those yellow eyes and found his voice. "I'm still trying to figure that out." Palpatine's laughter filled the chamber, a wet, rasping sound that made Peter's spider sense spike harder. The Emperor rose from his chair with surprising fluidity for someone who looked ancient, his black robes pooling around him like liquid shadow. "Honesty. How refreshing." The Emperor circled Peter slowly, hunched and leaning on a cane, but his movements were those of a predator evaluating prey. Lord Vader's reports paint an intriguing picture. A being from beyond our galaxy, possessing abilities that mimic force sensitivity without any connection to the force itself. Strength, agility, precognition, all derived from a scientific accident rather than mystical power. "Tell me, do you understand how rare you are?" "Back home, there are lots of people with powers," Peter said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm nothing special. But you are not home." Palpatine stopped directly in front of him, close enough that Peter could smell something acrid and wrong emanating from the old man. "Here, you are unique. A data point that should not exist. And unique things, young Spider-Man, are either weapons to be wielded or threats to be eliminated. Which would you prefer to be?" Peter's hands clenched at his sides. "I'd prefer to be neither. I'd prefer to find a way back to my own universe and leave you to your war." "Ah, but you cannot." Palpatine's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp. "The technology required to breach dimensional barriers is beyond even our capabilities. You are stranded here, permanently. Your choice is not whether to participate in galactic affairs, it is only which side you serve. I don't have to serve anyone. Everyone serves someone, child. Even those who claim independence serve their own desires, their own moral codes. The Emperor moved to a viewport showing Coruscant's sprawl. You believe in responsibility, yes. With great power comes great responsibility, Lord Vader mentioned this philosophy. Tell me, does your responsibility extend to this galaxy now? To the trillions who suffer because of rebel terrorism and misguided idealism? Peter's spider sense pulsed, warning him this was a trap. Every word was designed to manipulate, to guide him toward conclusions Palpatine wanted him to reach. I saw what Vader does to people who oppose him, Peter said carefully. I watched him kill a rebel pilot who was trying to surrender. Don't talk to me about suffering when your empire causes just as much. Did the pilot surrender? Palpatine's tone was curious, not defensive. Or did she simply lower her weapon while still planning to report intelligence to her terrorist network? Lord Vader prevented future Imperial deaths. Would you have preferred he allow her to live, knowing she would contribute to operations that kill thousands? I would have preferred he arrest her. Put her on trial. Give her a chance to. To what? Reform? Palpatine's laughter was bitter. The rebellion does not reform, child. It recruits, it indoctrinates, it sends young idealists to die for a cause that has already failed. The old republic is gone. The Jedi are extinct. The galaxy has chosen order over chaos. Those who resist are simply too stubborn or too foolish to accept reality. Peter's mind raced. This was the same argument Vader had made, but coming from Palpatine it felt different, more insidious, more calculated. The Emperor wasn't trying to convince Peter the Empire was good, he was trying to convince him that the rebellion was futile. You're saying I should just accept your totalitarian regime because fighting it is pointless? I am saying you should recognize efficiency when you see it. Palpatine turned from the viewport, yellow eyes gleaming. Before the Empire, the galaxy was drowning in bureaucratic corruption and corporate greed. The Trade Federation held entire systems hostage. The banking clan financed wars for profit. The Separatists murdered billions in their quest for independence. The Jedi Council, those vaunted peacekeepers, allowed it all to happen because they were too busy maintaining their dogma to actually govern. The Emperor's voice grew stronger, more passionate. I ended that chaos. I unified the galaxy under a single banner. I brought law and order to lawless regions. Yes, there have been casualties. Yes, there have been harsh measures. But the alternative was perpetual civil war. Tell me, Spider-Man, if you could end decades of conflict by imposing order, even through force, would you not do so? Would you allow millions to die in endless war simply to preserve your moral purity? Peter's throat was tight. Because he'd asked himself similar questions back home, about the Sokovia Accords, about superhuman registration, about whether heroes should be regulated. He'd seen what happened when powerful beings acted without oversight. He'd also seen what happened when oversight became oppression. Order isn't the same as justice, Peter said quietly. Justice is a luxury afforded by stable societies. Palpatine moved closer again, and Peter had to force himself not to step back. You come from a small world where individual heroics matter. Here, individual actions are meaningless against the scale of galactic civilization. You cannot stop crime on Coruscant alone, there are too many beings, too many conflicts, too much suffering. You can only support systems that minimize suffering. And my empire, for all its flaws, accomplishes that goal. Peter's spider sense suddenly spiked with a different kind of warning, not physical danger, but realization. Palpatine was good at this. Really good. Every word was designed to make Peter doubt himself, to make the Empire's atrocities seem necessary, to frame the rebellion as childish idealists who made things worse. And worst of all, some of it made sense. You're trying to recruit me, Peter said. Just like Vader did. Just like that rebel pilot tried to. Everyone wants to use me. I want to save you from wasting your potential. Palpatine's tone shifted to something almost grandfatherly. You possess abilities that could protect millions. Your danger sense could prevent assassinations, terrorist attacks, disasters. Your strength could rescue people from situations no normal being could survive. Your intelligence could advance scientific research that benefits entire systems. But only if you have resources, facilities, funding, support. The Empire can provide all of that. The rebellion can offer only hiding in shadows and moral compromise. The Empire would own me, Peter countered. I'd be another weapon in your arsenal. You would be a valued asset with agency to choose your missions. Palpatine spread his hands in a gesture of reasonableness. I do not require mindless obedience, child. I require results. If you wish to focus on humanitarian efforts, disaster relief, medical emergencies, rescue operations, you would be free to do so under Imperial sponsorship. You would save more lives in 1 month than you saved in years on your primitive world. Peter's head was spinning. The offer sounded genuine. And it aligned with everything he wanted, to help people, to save lives, to use his power responsibly. But his spider sense was still screaming, warning him that Palpatine's words were poison wrapped in honey. What's the catch? Peter asked bluntly. Palpatine's smile widened. Perceptive. The catch, as you say, is that you would occasionally be required to act against the rebellion. Not as an assassin, I have Lord Vader and the Inquisitors for such crude work. But your danger sense could locate rebel cells before they strike. Your abilities could capture high-value targets without casualties. You would save Imperial lives and rebel lives by preventing conflicts before they escalate. You mean I'd be a spy? A hunter? You would be a peacekeeper. Precisely what the Jedi claimed to be, but with actual effectiveness. Palpatine moved to a console and activated a hologram. It showed a star system Peter didn't recognize. 3 weeks ago, rebels bombed an Imperial garrison on Ryloth. 173 soldiers died. But the garrison was located in a civilian district. The explosion killed 412 civilians as well. Men, women, children. All dead because the rebellion values symbolic victories over innocent lives. The hologram shifted, showing images that made Peter's stomach turn. Bodies in the rubble. Rescue workers pulling children from collapsed buildings. Survivors with burned scars and missing limbs. Your danger sense could have prevented this, Palpatine said softly. You could have sensed the bomb before it detonated. Evacuated the area. Saved those 412 lives. But you were not there. You were not part of my Empire's protective apparatus. Those people died in your absence. That's not fair, Peter whispered. I can't be everywhere. I can't save everyone. No. But you can save more than you save now, which is none. Palpatine deactivated the hologram. Every moment you hesitate, every moment you cling to outdated notions of heroic independence, more innocents die. The mathematics are simple, child. Join me, and save thousands. Refuse, and bear responsibility for every preventable death that occurs while you nurse your conscience. Peter felt like he was drowning. Because Palpatine was right about the math, if Peter had the ability to prevent attacks and chose not to, wasn't he responsible for the victims? Wasn't that exactly what Uncle Ben's lesson meant? With great power came the responsibility to use it, not to sit on the sidelines judging both sides while people died. But his spider sense wouldn't stop screaming. And Peter had learned to trust that warning even when his rational mind couldn't identify the threat. I need time, Peter said, hating how weak his voice sounded. I need to see more. Understand more. I can't make a decision this big based on one conversation. Palpatine's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the room's atmosphere, a coldness that made Peter's breath visible for just a moment. Time. The Emperor's voice lost its grandfatherly warmth, becoming flat and analytical. You wish to observe both sides. Experience the rebellion's chaos firsthand. Compare methodologies. A reasonable request, if you were a scholar studying historical conflicts. But you are not. You are a weapon without allegiance, and weapons that remain uncommitted become liabilities. Peter's spider sense exploded into panic. He took an involuntary step back. Lord Vader believes you can be convinced through reason, Palpatine continued, moving forward with each word. He thinks your morality can be shaped, your naivete corrected through exposure to reality. He may be correct. But I did not conquer a galaxy through patience, child. I conquered it through understanding when persuasion fails and alternative approaches become necessary. Palpatine raised one withered hand, and Peter's spider sense showed him the attack before it came, lightning, blue-white and crackling, arcing from the Emperor's fingertips. Peter dove left, his reflexes barely fast enough to avoid the bolt. It struck the floor where he'd been standing, scorching the stone black. Impressive, Palpatine rasped. Your danger sense is even more effective than reported. Let us test its limits. More lightning filled the chamber. Peter's spider sense guided him through a frantic series of dodges, roll, jump, wall crawl to the ceiling, drop and slide. The Emperor moved with impossible speed for his apparent age, lightning streaming from his hands in constant barrages. Peter webbed a piece of debris and threw it at Palpatine, but the old man simply gestured and the projectile disintegrated. You cannot harm me, child. Your webs are useless. Your strength means nothing against the dark side of the Force. Another bolt caught Peter's shoulder, and pain exploded through his nervous system unlike anything he'd experienced. It wasn't just electricity, it was agony itself, distilled and weaponized. But you interest me still. Your danger sense allows you to evade what kills most beings instantly. A useful trait. One I will study. Peter's thoughts raced through the pain. He couldn't fight Palpatine directly, the Emperor was too powerful, too fast. But he didn't have to win. He just had to survive long enough to. His spider sense showed him the answer, Vader, standing motionless near the chamber entrance, watching the entire exchange. Not intervening, but present. Peter changed vectors, dodging another lightning bolt and landing near the Dark Lord. Vader. Peter gasped. You said the Emperor wanted to talk. This isn't talking. The Emperor's methods are his own, Vader replied, utterly calm. Defend yourself or submit. Those are your options. Another bolt forced Peter to dodge. His suit was smoking in places, and his shoulder felt like it was still on fire. But his spider sense was showing him patterns now. Palpatine's attacks followed predictable rhythms, built on decades of muscle memory. If Peter could just. He webbed both walls and slingshot himself directly at Palpatine, trusting his spider sense to guide him through the lightning. For half a second, it worked. He was inside Palpatine's guard, close enough to see the surprise in those yellow eyes. Then the force hit him like a physical wall, slamming him backward into the stone. The impact drove the air from his lungs, and before he could recover, invisible hands were around his throat. Not choking, just holding, demonstrating absolute control. Palpatine approached slowly, lightning crackling between his fingers. You are skilled, child. Resourceful. But ultimately, you are outmatched. The Force is power beyond your comprehension, and I am its master. You will serve me, or you will suffer until service becomes your only escape from pain. Peter's vision was starting to dim. His spider sense was screaming, but there was nothing to dodge, no attack to avoid, just constant, inexorable pressure. My lord, Vader's mechanical voice cut through the chamber. The specimen's unique properties may be damaged by excessive torture. If you wish to study his danger sense, he must remain functional. The pressure released. Peter collapsed to the floor, gasping and retching. Through watering eyes, he saw Palpatine and Vader exchange a look, some unspoken communication between master and servant. Lord Vader makes a valid point, Palpatine said, his grandfatherly tone returning as if the last few minutes hadn't happened. I may have been overzealous in my evaluation. Forgive an old man his enthusiasm for unique specimens. Peter pushed himself to his knees, every muscle screaming. You're insane. I am practical. Palpatine returned to his chair, settling into it like nothing had happened. You needed to understand the consequences of refusal. Now you do. You may have your time to observe, child. Lord Vader will arrange a controlled exposure to both Imperial operations and Rebel activities. You will see firsthand which side truly serves the galaxy's interests. And then you will choose. But know this. The Emperor's yellow eyes fixed on Peter with laser intensity. If you choose to oppose me, I will break you. I will study every aspect of your danger sense as I peel apart your mind and body. I will discover how to replicate your abilities and grant them to my inquisitors. And when I am finished learning from you, I will ensure your death is neither quick nor merciful. This is not a threat, child. It is simply reality. I always collect what is useful, and I always destroy what cannot be collected. Peter met those terrible eyes, his whole body shaking from adrenaline and pain and pure terror. But he forced himself to speak. With great power comes great responsibility. You've got all the power in the galaxy, and you've used it to become a monster. That's not reality. That's just you. For a moment, Palpatine's expression was unreadable. Then he smiled, genuinely smiled, with something like approval. Perhaps there is hope for you yet, Spider-Man, Lord Vader, take him to the observation program. Let us see if his principles survive contact with the real galaxy. As Vader hauled him to his feet and guided him toward the exit, Peter's spider sense finally began to quiet. But the Emperor's final words followed him out of the chamber. We will speak again soon, child. And next time, you will address me as Master. The door sealed behind them, and Peter allowed himself one shaking breath before his legs gave out entirely. Vader caught him with one hand, holding him upright like a puppet. You survived, the Dark Lord observed. Most do not, when the Emperor decides to test them. Consider it a compliment. Peter wanted to laugh, to scream, to do anything but stand there trembling. Instead, he just whispered. I need to get out of here. I need to find a way home. I can't do this. I'm not strong enough. No, Vader agreed. You are not. Not yet. But you will learn, or you will die. There is no third option in the Emperor's galaxy. As they walked through the crimson-lit corridors, Peter's mind played Palpatine's offer over and over. Save thousands. Prevent bombings. Use his power responsibly. All he had to do was serve the most evil being he'd ever encountered. The mathematics were simple. The choice was impossible. And Peter Parker had no idea which would destroy him faster, accepting or refusing. The observation program turned out to be a luxury apartment in Coruscant's upper levels, 3 rooms with floor-to-ceiling viewports, a bed more comfortable than anything Peter had ever slept in, and enough food in the kitchen unit to feed a dozen people. It would have been paradise if not for the 2 royal guards standing motionless outside the door and the tracking anklet Vader had secured around his leg before leaving. You will be permitted supervised excursions throughout Coruscant, Vader had explained. Imperial intelligence will monitor your movements and interactions. You are not a prisoner, you are an observer. Use this time wisely. Then he'd left, and Peter was alone for the first time since arriving in this galaxy. He'd spent the first hour in the shower, trying to wash away the smell of ozone and burnt fabric from Palpatine's lightning. His shoulder still ached where the bolt had connected, and when he looked in the mirror, he found a branching scar that looked like a lightning strike frozen in his skin. A permanent reminder of the Emperor's enthusiasm. Now Peter stood at the viewport, watching Coruscant's endless traffic, and tried to think. His web shooters were down to critical levels, maybe 2 good shots left. His suit was damaged in a dozen places. And his mind was spinning with everything he'd experienced in less than 2 days. 47 crew members. 600 at the listening posts. Dara fell with her neck snapped. 412 civilians killed in the Ryloth bombing. The numbers kept piling up, a mountain of death that Peter couldn't process, couldn't fix, couldn't take responsibility for, even though his presence had contributed to some of it. His spider sense pulsed gently, not danger, but awareness. Someone was approaching the apartment. Peter tensed, then relaxed slightly when the door chimed politely instead of just opening. "Come in," he called, not sure if that's how doors worked here. The door slid open, revealing a man in an Imperial officer's uniform, gray with rank insignia Peter didn't recognize. He was maybe 40, with neat hair and tired eyes, carrying a datapad and a small case. "Spider-Man," the officer said, inclining his head slightly. "I am Commander Thane Corvus, Imperial Intelligence. Lord Vader assigned me to coordinate your observation schedule. May I enter?" Peter gestured for him to come in. Corvus moved with the efficient precision of career military, setting his case on the table and opening it to reveal web fluid cartridges. A dozen of them, neatly arranged. Peter stared. "How did you?" "We analyzed the residue from your web shooters and synthesized a compatible formula. Imperial chemistry is quite advanced." Corvus handed him one cartridge. "Test it, please. Ensure compatibility." Peter loaded the cartridge with shaking hands, aimed at the wall, and fired. Web fluid shot out in a perfect stream, adhering exactly as it should. He tugged on it experimentally. Tensile strength was right, adhesion was perfect, even the dissolution timing seemed correct. "It's perfect," Peter said, surprised. "This must have taken hours of analysis and—" 17 hours, Corvus confirmed. "We began the moment Lord Vader transmitted your specifications. The Empire values efficiency, Spider-Man. If you are to observe our operations, you should be properly equipped." It was such a normal, helpful gesture that Peter didn't know how to respond. He'd expected threats, intimidation, maybe torture. Not someone solving his web fluid problem like it was routine logistics. "Thank you," Peter managed. "You're welcome." Corvus activated his datapad. "Your observation schedule begins tomorrow at 0800 local time. We've arranged 4 distinct experiences over the next week to provide balanced perspective on Imperial operations and the Rebellion's activities. First, you will accompany a humanitarian relief mission to a disaster site in the Outer Rim. Second, you will observe Imperial security forces maintaining order in Coruscant's lower levels. Third, you will witness a rebel cell's operation. We have intelligence on their target and will allow the operation to proceed while you observe. Fourth, you will participate in the investigation of a terrorist bombing. Does this schedule seem acceptable?" Peter's mind raced. They were actually doing it, giving him access to both sides, letting him see for himself. But his spider sense tingled with suspicion. "Why are you really doing this? The Emperor could have just tortured me until I agreed to serve." Corvus's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. "May I speak candidly?" "Please." The commander sat down, gesturing for Peter to do the same. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, more human. "The Emperor is many things, powerful, brilliant, ruthless. But he is also pragmatic. Breaking you through torture would yield a resentful, unreliable asset. Convincing you through evidence would yield a committed ally who serves willingly. The latter is infinitely more valuable." Corvus paused. "And between us, Spider-Man, you represent something unique. A moral perspective unburdened by this galaxy's history. Your observations may prove useful beyond simple recruitment." "Useful how?" "The Empire has existed for nearly 2 decades. We have been effective in establishing order. But effectiveness and righteousness are not always synonymous. If you observe our methods and suggest improvements, ways to achieve our goals with less collateral damage or more humane approaches. Such suggestions would be welcomed by certain officers who share your concerns. Peter studied Corvus carefully. His spider sense wasn't warning him of deception, but it wasn't giving him an all-clear either. You're saying there are people in the Empire who don't agree with the Emperor's methods? I'm saying there are people who execute the Emperor's orders while wishing those orders were different. Corvus met his gaze directly. Not traitors. Not rebels. Simply soldiers who believe order and mercy need not be mutually exclusive. You could be a voice for that perspective, if you choose to join us. It was the most honest thing anyone had said to Peter since he arrived. No manipulation, no grand speeches, just a tired officer admitting the system he served wasn't perfect. What about you? Peter asked. Do you believe in the Empire? Corvus was quiet for a long moment. I believe in preventing chaos. I served in the Clone Wars, Spider-Man. I watched the Republic tear itself apart, watched systems burn because the Separatists and the Republic both prioritized ideology over stability. When the Empire rose from those ashes and unified the galaxy, yes, I believed. I still believe order is necessary. But I have also watched methods become more brutal as resistance persists. I have executed orders that kept me awake at night. And I wonder, sometimes, if there might be a better way. Peter felt something crack in his chest, not breaking, but opening. Here was someone who understood the impossible position Peter was in. Someone who lived in the gray area between right and wrong and struggled with it daily. Thank you for being honest, Peter said quietly. Thank you for listening. Corvus stood, returning to professional demeanor. Your first excursion begins at 0800. An Imperial relief ship departs for Jagomir, a mining colony that suffered a catastrophic tunnel collapse. 6,000 beings are trapped. Imperial engineers and medical teams will attempt rescue. You will observe and, if you wish, assist. Your abilities could save lives. After Corvus left, Peter sat in the quiet apartment and thought about what came next. The Empire was offering him exactly what he wanted, a chance to save people, to use his power responsibly. But at what cost? Serving Palpatine? Becoming complicit in atrocities? His spider sense pulsed, and Peter realized someone was trying to contact him, not through the door, but through the apartment's communication system. A light was blinking on a console he hadn't noticed before. Peter approached cautiously and touched the activation panel. A hologram flickered to life, small, blue-tinted, showing a hooded figure whose face was obscured. Spider-Man, a distorted voice said. Don't respond verbally, they're monitoring you. Just listen. My name is Saw Gerrera. I lead a rebel cell operating on Coruscant. We know the Empire is trying to recruit you. We know what you can do. And we know you're not sure who to trust. Peter's spider sense was neutral, not warning him of danger, but not giving approval either. The observation program is manipulation, Saw continued. They'll show you Imperial successes and rebel failures. They'll convince you we're terrorists while they're peacekeepers. But I'm offering you the truth, come to the lower levels. See what the Empire does to people who can't fight back. See the beings they abandon, the systems they exploit, the suffering they cause when no one's watching. Then make your choice. The hologram provided coordinates and a time, midnight, 3 days from now. Then it flickered out. Peter stood there, staring at the dead console, his mind racing. The Empire was offering supervised observation of their best behavior. The rebellion was offering unsupervised observation of the Empire's worst. Both were trying to manipulate him toward their side. But maybe, just maybe, if he saw both perspectives, he could figure out the truth for himself. His spider sense pulsed again, different this time. Peter moved to the viewport and looked down, far down, kilometers below where light barely reached, into the canyons between buildings where Coruscant's underworld festered. Somewhere down there, people were suffering. Somewhere up here, people were maintaining order through brutality. And somewhere in between, Peter Parker had to figure out who he was in this galaxy. He loaded the new web cartridges into his shooters, testing each one. The Empire had given him these, had analyzed his technology and replicated it perfectly. That took resources, intelligence, efficiency. It also took a surveillance apparatus capable of breaking down alien tech in less than a day. Tomorrow he'd save people trapped in a mine collapse. He'd be Spider-Man again, helping victims, using his power responsibly. But he'd be doing it under the Empire's banner, with their resources, as part of their recruitment pitch. Was that compromise or corruption? Peter didn't know. But he was going to find out. He spent the rest of the night at the viewport, watching Coruscant's endless traffic and thinking about responsibility. About power. About the terrible mathematics of choosing who to save when you couldn't save everyone. Somewhere in the Imperial Palace, Palpatine felt Peter's turmoil through the Force and smiled. The boy was breaking exactly as planned, not through torture, but through impossible choices. Soon he would realize that serving the Empire was the only logical path for someone who truly wanted to save lives at scale. And somewhere in Coruscant's lower levels, Saw Gerrera checked his weapons and prepared for midnight 3 days hence. The Empire thought they could turn Spider-Man into their weapon. Saw would show the boy what the Empire's order really looked like when you scraped away the propaganda. Both sides were certain they would win Peter Parker's allegiance. Neither understood that Peter was about to make a choice that would satisfy no one, not the Empire, not the Rebellion, and not himself. But it would be his choice. And in a galaxy where everyone wanted to use him, that was the only thing he could control. Dawn broke over Coruscant, if you could call it dawn when the city never truly slept. Light filtered between the massive towers, painting the upper levels in gold while leaving the lower levels in shadow. Peter watched it from his viewport, web shooters loaded, suit repaired as best he could manage, and mind made up about one thing. He would play alone with both sides' games. He would see everything they wanted to show him and everything they wanted to hide. He would gather information, make connections, and understand this galaxy's conflicts from every angle. And then, only then, would he decide what Spider-Man's responsibility meant in a galaxy far, far away. His spider sense pulsed once, acknowledging the decision. Not approval or warning, just recognition that the path ahead would be harder than anything he'd faced before. Peter pulled on his mask, feeling its familiar weight settle over his features. "Okay, Parker," he whispered to his reflection. "Time to see if you can be a hero in someone else's war." The apartment door chimed. 0800, exactly. Commander Corvus was punctual. Peter took one more look at Coruscant's impossible skyline, then turned to face whatever came next. The observation program had begun. The Imperial relief ship Mercy's Hand was nothing like the Devastator. Where the Star Destroyer had been all military efficiency and intimidation, the relief vessel was purely functional, cargo holds filled with medical supplies, engineering equipment, and temporary shelters. The crew wore white uniforms with red medical crosses, and they moved with the practiced urgency of people who saved lives for a living. Peter stood in the main cargo bay, watching Imperial engineers check their equipment while medics reviewed triage protocols. Commander Corvus stood beside him, datapad in hand. "Jagamir is a Tabana gas mining colony," Corvus explained. 3 days ago, seismic activity caused a catastrophic collapse in the primary extraction shaft. 6,000 miners are trapped 3 kilometers underground with limited oxygen. The colony's own rescue capabilities are minimal, they requested Imperial assistance within an hour of the collapse. And the Empire responded? Peter couldn't keep the surprise from his voice. The Empire always responds to legitimate disaster requests. Corvus pulled up a holographic display showing the mine structure. "We have 8 hours of oxygen remaining when we arrive. After that, beings begin dying from hypoxia. Our mission is to extract as many survivors as possible while stabilizing the shaft to prevent further collapse." A woman approached, tall, with gray streaks in her dark hair and the confident bearing of someone used to command. Her uniform marked her as a senior medical officer. "Commander Corvus," she said, nodding to him before turning to Peter. "And you must be our observer. I'm Chief Medical Officer Sareth Null. The crew has been briefed on your unique capabilities. If you're willing to assist, we could use someone who can navigate unstable terrain and lift debris." Peter's spider sense gave a gentle pulse, not warning, just acknowledgement of the woman's sincerity. She genuinely wanted to save lives, not score political points. "I'm here to help however I can," Peter said. Sareth's expression softened slightly. "Good. Because 6,000 people are counting on us not to fail." The journey through hyperspace took 4 hours. Peter spent the time learning about the crew. Most were volunteers who joined Imperial Relief Services specifically to respond to disasters. They told him stories about flash floods on Ryloth, earthquakes on Lothal, and disease outbreaks in the Outer Rim. Every story ended the same way: Imperial resources arriving when local governments couldn't cope, lives saved through superior technology and coordination. It was hard to reconcile these stories with images of Vader choking rebels and Palpatine cackling while shooting lightning. When they dropped out of hyperspace near Jagamir, the scale of the disaster became immediately apparent. The mining colony was built into an asteroid, and a massive crack had split the surface like a wound. Smaller vessels clustered around the damage, local rescue teams working frantically with equipment that looked generations out of date. The Mercy's hand docked at an emergency airlock. Sareth gathered her team in the cargo bay for final instructions. "We have 3 objectives," she announced, her voice carrying over the crowd. 1. Establish life support in the trapped sections. 2. Create stable evacuation routes. 3. Extract survivors in order of medical priority. Engineering teams will handle objectives 1 and 2. Medical teams will handle triage and treatment. Everyone else supports these goals. Understood? A chorus of affirmatives. Then Sareth turned to Peter. "Spider-Man, you'll accompany Engineer Corps Alpha. Your strength and mobility will be invaluable for clearing debris and accessing collapsed sections. Follow Chief Engineer Voss's orders, he's been doing this for 15 years. Voss turned out to be a stocky man with cybernetic arms and a face that had seen too many disasters. He looked Peter up and down skeptically. "Civilian superhero," he muttered. "No offense, kid, but I've seen a lot of well-meaning volunteers panic when they see what mining disasters actually look like. You sure you're up for this?" Peter thought about the time he'd held a ferry together with nothing but webs and determination. "I've pulled people out of collapsed buildings before. I won't panic. We'll see." Voss gestured to his team, 6 engineers with heavy equipment and a floating medical droid. "Let's move. Oxygen clock is ticking." They entered the mine through an auxiliary shaft, descending on repulsor platforms into darkness broken only by emergency lighting. Peter's spider sense immediately activated, showing him unstable sections, weak supports, and pockets where the rock was still settling. The deeper they went, the worse it got: twisted metal, collapsed tunnels, and the acrid smell of burnt electronics. They found the first survivors at the 2-kilometer mark. 23 miners huddled in a small chamber, their oxygen masks fogged with condensation, faces pale with hypoxia. The medical droid immediately began triage while Voss's team assessed the structural damage. "We can't use heavy equipment here," Voss announced, examining a massive boulder blocking the main tunnel. "Too much vibration will bring down the whole section. We need—" "I've got it." Peter moved to the boulder, found secure handholds, and lifted. His enhanced strength strained against the weight, easily 10 tons, but he'd lifted more. The boulder shifted, scraping against stone, and Peter carefully pivoted it away from the tunnel entrance. Voss stared. "Okay. I take it back. You're not a civilian volunteer." They extracted the 23 miners, who were loaded onto repulsor stretchers and sent to the surface. Then they continued deeper, following life sign readings from the scanning equipment. The next group was worse, 40 miners trapped behind a collapsed ceiling, oxygen depleted to dangerous levels, several with crush injuries. Peter wall-crawled across the unstable ceiling, using his webs to create a support network while Voss's team cut through the debris with precision lasers. When they breached the chamber, 5 of the miners were already unconscious. The medical droid worked frantically, injecting stimulants and oxygen boosters while Peter and the engineers cleared a path for evacuation. They saved 38. 2 didn't make it. Peter stared at the covered bodies, feeling the familiar weight of failure. 2 people he couldn't save. 2 families who would get news they dreaded. His spider sense had warned him which miners were in critical condition, but there hadn't been time, hadn't been enough medical supplies, hadn't been. Not your fault, kid. Voss's hand landed on his shoulder. We got here as fast as we could. Did everything right. Sometimes people still die. That's the job. It shouldn't be, Peter whispered. No. But it is. Voss turned back to his team. Sector 7 next. Readings show 300 miners trapped near the main extraction chamber. That's going to be the big one. The descent to Sector 7 took another hour, navigating through tunnels that threatened to collapse with every step. Peter's spider sense was in constant motion, warning him away from unstable sections, guiding him toward safer paths. He found himself taking point, his danger sense more reliable than the structural scanners. When they reached Sector 7, Peter's breath caught. The main extraction chamber was massive, easily 100 meters across, and completely devastated. Support beams had snapped like twigs. Machinery lay crushed under rockfalls. And everywhere, scattered across the chamber floor, were miners. Some moving, some still, some trapped under debris too heavy for them to lift. 300 life signs, Voss read from his scanner. 70% showing critical oxygen deprivation. We've got maybe 20 minutes before mass casualties. Saratha's voice crackled over the comms. Medical teams are deploying to your position. Keep the chamber stable until we can evacuate. But Peter's spider sense was screaming a warning. The entire chamber was a death trap, one wrong move and the remaining ceiling would collapse, killing everyone inside. They needed to move fast, but moving fast meant vibrations, meant disturbing the delicate balance of forces holding thousands of tons of rock overhead. We can't use repulsor stretchers in here, one of the engineers said, voice tight with panic. The anti-grav field will destabilize the rock. Then we carry them out manually, Voss decided. Spider-Man, start clearing paths. Everyone else, prepare for extraction by hand. We're going to have to. Peter's spider sense exploded. Everyone down. He grabbed the nearest engineer and threw them behind cover just as a section of ceiling collapsed. Rock rained down where they'd been standing, and dust filled the chamber. Through the chaos, Peter heard something that made his blood run cold, screaming. The collapse had crushed 6 miners who'd been too close to the impact zone. Peter was moving before he thought, wall-crawling across the unstable ceiling, webs shooting out to create a network of support. His spider sense showed him the stress points, where the rock was weakest, where his webs would do the most good. He worked with desperate speed, knowing every second counted. What the hell is he doing? Someone shouted. He's stabilizing the ceiling, Voss breathed. He's using his webs like support beams. That's brilliant. Peter finished the web network and dropped back to the floor, breathing hard. The chamber was more stable now, but his spider sense still whispered warnings. They had minutes at best. Everyone able to walk, move toward the exit now, Peter commanded, surprised by the authority in his own voice. Engineers, help the ones who can't. I'll handle the debris. For the next 15 minutes, Peter Parker became a one-man rescue operation. He lifted boulders that would have required heavy machinery. He web-zipped injured miners to safety faster than repulsor stretchers could have moved them. His spider sense guided him to survivors buried under rubble, showed him the safest paths through the unstable terrain, warned him when to evacuate sections before they collapsed. The Imperial crew worked around him with practiced efficiency, but Peter could feel their amazement. They'd seen disasters before, but they'd never seen someone who could sense where the danger was before it manifested. The medical teams arrived and set up a triage station at the chamber entrance. Sareth moved between patients with calm precision, making life-or-death decisions in seconds. Priority 1, Priority 2, Priority 3. Some miners were too far gone to save. She marked them as Priority 4 and moved on, dedicating resources to those who could be saved. It was brutal calculus, the kind Peter had never had to make before. Back home, he'd always tried to save everyone. Here, saving everyone meant saving no one. They extracted 287 miners alive. 13 died during the rescue. Peter sat on a boulder outside the chamber, mask pulled up, breathing hard and trying not to vomit. His hands were shaking. 13 people. 13 people he'd been meters away from, 13 people his spider sense had warned him about, 13 people he couldn't reach in time because he'd been busy saving others. Sareth found him there, her uniform covered in dust and blood. 287 lives, she said quietly, sitting beside him. Because you were here. Because your abilities let us work faster and safer than we ever could have otherwise. Do you understand what that means? It means 13 people are still dead. Yes. But 287 are alive. And without you, that number would have been much lower. Maybe 50. Maybe fewer. Saretha's voice was gentle but firm. You can't save everyone, Spider-Man. No one can. But you can save more. And that's what matters. Peter wiped his eyes. How do you do this? How do you decide who lives and who dies? I don't decide who dies. I decide how to maximize the number who live. It's not the same thing. Sareth stood, offering him a hand. Come on. There are still 3 more trapped sections to clear. Your danger sense could save another 100 lives before this is over. Peter took her hand and stood. His spider sense pulsed, not in warning, but in acknowledgement. Sareth was right. He couldn't save everyone. But he could save more. The rest of the rescue operation took 6 more hours. By the end, they'd extracted 5,200 miners alive. 800 hadn't made it, trapped in sections that collapsed before rescue could arrive, or too injured to survive even with immediate medical attention. Peter sat in the Mercy's Hands cargo bay during the return journey, exhausted beyond anything he'd ever experienced. Not physically, his enhanced stamina could handle the exertion. Emotionally. Every one of those 800 deaths felt personal, felt preventable, felt like his failure. But Commander Corvus sat beside him with a datapad, showing him the statistics. Before the Empire, the Jagamir Mining Corporation averaged a 60% survival rate in major disasters. Local rescue services lacked the technology and training for efficient extraction. Today, we achieved an 87% survival rate. That's 5,200 families who still have their loved ones. 5,200 beings who will see tomorrow because you helped us. Peter looked at the numbers. Tried to feel proud. Mostly just felt tired. The Empire does this, he asked. Responds to disasters like this regularly. Every day, somewhere in the galaxy. Corvus pulled up a galactic map covered in markers. These are active Imperial relief operations. Floods, earthquakes, disease outbreaks, famines. The Empire maintains the largest humanitarian response network in galactic history. We save millions of lives annually through nothing but logistics and resources. And the rebellion? Corvus's expression darkened. The rebellion blows up the ships that carry these supplies. They sabotage the infrastructure that makes rapid response possible. They claim to fight for freedom while thousands die because our medical teams can't reach disaster zones through their blockades. Peter was silent. Because he could see it now, the seductive logic of the Empire's argument. They had resources. They had organization. They saved lives at a scale no individual hero could match. All you had to do was ignore the tyranny, the oppression, the fact that the same system saving miners on Jagamir was murdering dissidents on other worlds. Tomorrow, Corvus said, we'll show you the other side. Imperial security operations in Coruscant's lower levels. You'll see what happens when order breaks down, when the Empire's protection is absent. Then you can make an informed comparison. As the ship jumped to hyperspace, Peter pulled off his mask and stared at his reflection in the viewport. He looked older somehow, worn in ways that had nothing to do with physical age. With great power comes great responsibility, he whispered to his reflection. But what did responsibility mean when you had to choose between serving tyranny or allowing preventable deaths? When the system that saved thousands also oppressed billions? Uncle Ben had never prepared him for this. And Peter was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, there was no right answer. Just varying degrees of wrong, and the terrible burden of choosing which wrong you could live with. His spider sense pulsed once, acknowledging the thought. Tomorrow, he'd see Coruscant's lower levels. See what the Empire's order looked like to the people who couldn't afford the upper city's safety. Then, in 3 days, he'd meet Saw Gerrera and see what the rebellion claimed the Empire was hiding. And after all that, Peter Parker would have to make a choice that would define him in this galaxy. He just hoped he'd still recognize himself when it was over. Coruscant's lower levels smelled like desperation. Peter descended through the city's vertical strata in an Imperial patrol transport, watching through the viewports as the architecture grew older, more decrepit, more desperate with every 100 meters. The gleaming towers of the upper city gave way to mid-levels where legitimate businesses operated in aging buildings, which gave way to lower levels where sunlight was a memory and the only illumination came from flickering neon signs advertising things Peter didn't want to think about. Commander Corvus sat across from him, flanked by 6 Imperial Security Bureau agents in black armor. Not stormtroopers, these were specialists, their gear designed for urban pacification rather than military operations. Level 1313, Corvus explained as they descended into near-total darkness. Approximately 5 million beings live here, though exact numbers are impossible to determine. No centralized government, no legitimate economy, no imperial oversight beyond periodic security sweeps. It is, effectively, a failed state existing inside Coruscant itself. Peter's spider sense had been building steadily as they descended, a low warning that intensified with every level. Down here, danger was ambient, not a specific threat, just the pervasive violence of a place where civilization had collapsed. The transport landed on a platform that had seen better decades. The moment the ramp lowered, Peter's enhanced senses were overwhelmed, the stench of unwashed bodies and chemical waste, the cacophony of 1,000 arguments and deals and threats happening simultaneously, the visual assault of graffiti and rust and decay that covered every surface. And everywhere, beings. Humans, Twi'leks, Rhodians, species Peter didn't recognize, all moving through the shadows with the furtive urgency of prey animals aware they lived in a predator's world. Stay close, the lead ISB agent commanded, activating a portable shield generator. Level 1313 gangs will target isolated Imperials. The shield will deter small arms fire, but we're still vulnerable to concentrated attack. They moved through streets that were more like tunnels, narrow passages between buildings that had been built and rebuilt so many times that the original structure was buried under layers of desperate expansion. Peter's spider sense guided him around potential ambush points, past zones where violence simmered just beneath the surface, through areas where his presence triggered hostile attention from dozens of watching eyes. The Empire makes no attempt to police this level? Peter asked, stepping over a body that might have been sleeping or might have been dead. We tried, initially. Corvus gestured to a blast-scarred building. We established precinct stations, sent patrol units, attempted to impose order. The gangs united and drove us out. Cost us 300 personnel in a single week. The Emperor decided the resources required to pacify the lower levels exceeded the strategic value of doing so. So you just abandoned millions of people. We offered relocation to productive levels for anyone willing to work legitimate employment. Few accepted. Most beings here are criminals, addicts, or simply too broken to function in civilization. Corvus's tone was matter-of-fact, not cruel. The Empire provides order to those who accept it. Those who reject imperial governance accept the consequences. Peter's spider sense suddenly spiked. We're being followed. 6, no, 8 contacts. Armed. The ISB agents immediately formed a defensive perimeter, weapons raised. Peter's enhanced vision picked out the followers, teenagers, mostly, with makeshift armor and blasters that looked barely functional. Gang members. Predators who'd identified Imperial agents as targets. Should we engage? An agent asked. No, Corvus decided. We're here to observe, not escalate. Keep moving. They continued deeper into the level, the gang members shadowing them at a distance. Peter's spider sense tracked each one, noting their positions, their weapons, their growing confidence as more gang members joined the hunt. By the time they reached what Corvus identified as their destination, a neutral zone, where multiple gangs conducted business, they had a tale of 20 armed beings. The neutral zone was an open plaza surrounding a massive support column. Makeshift market stalls sold everything from food to weapons to things Peter didn't want to identify. Hundreds of beings milled about, conducting transactions in a dozen languages. And overseeing it all from a raised platform was a massive hut, surrounded by guards and attendants. Gracchus the Hutt, Corvus identified. De facto ruler of this sector. He maintains order through violence and economic control. Anyone who violates his rules is executed publicly. The result is a functional economy, albeit one based on slavery, narcotics, and extortion. Peter watched a transaction play out, a human woman trading something wrapped in cloth to a Trandoshan, both parties nervous, both clearly operating under threat of violence if the deal went wrong. His spider sense showed him armed enforcers positioned throughout the plaza, ready to intervene if anyone stepped out of line. This is what civilization looks like without the Empire, Corvus said quietly. Brutal, exploitative, but functional because a tyrant enforces order through fear. The rebellion claims to fight for freedom from imperial oppression. This is freedom. Ask yourself, is it better? Before Peter could respond, his spider sense exploded. Down. He grabbed Corvus and threw them both behind a market stall just as blaster fire erupted from multiple directions. The gang members who'd been following them had decided to attack, assuming the ISB agents were vulnerable in the crowd. The agents returned fire with disciplined precision, their shots finding targets while minimizing collateral damage. But the gangs had numbers and local knowledge. Peter's spider sense showed him the tactical situation. Agents were outnumbered 4-1 and being flanked. Without intervention, they'd be overwhelmed in minutes. Peter moved without thinking. He web-zipped to the nearest flanking position, yanked the weapon from a gang member's hands, and webbed him to a wall. His spider sense guided him through the chaos, dodging blaster bolts while disarming attackers with surgical precision. No killing blows, no permanent injuries, just enough force to neutralize threats. One of the gang members produced a thermal detonator. Peter's spider sense screamed, showing him the blast radius, 20 meters, dozens of civilians in the kill zone. He webbed the detonator mid-throw, redirected it upward, and it exploded harmlessly against the ceiling. The fight lasted 90 seconds. By the end, 15 gang members were webbed to various surfaces, 3 were unconscious, and the rest had fled. The ISB agent stood in defensive formation, staring at Peter with something like awe. I counted 37 hostiles, the lead agent said. You neutralized half of them alone. While protecting civilians. That's unprecedented. Peter's spider sense was still screaming. He turned toward Gracchus's platform and saw the hut gesturing, and suddenly the plaza's ambient danger level quadrupled. Enforcers were moving in from every direction, not gang members, but professional killers in matching armor. "We need to leave," Peter said urgently. "The hut is sending his people. We're outnumbered 100 to 1. "Agreed." Corvus activated his comm extraction, now. Plaza coordinates. They fought a running retreat through the streets, Peter's spider sense guiding them away from ambush points while the ISB agents laid down covering fire. The transport swooped in just as the hut's enforcers closed the trap, and they lifted off with blaster bolts sparking against the hull. Inside the transport, climbing back toward the upper levels, Peter sat in silence while the agents checked each other for injuries. No casualties, his intervention had prevented that. "You saved our lives," the lead agent said simply. "Thank you." Peter just nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Because he'd seen it now, the alternative to imperial order. A place where might made right, where the strong preyed on the weak, where violence was the only currency that mattered. Gracchus the Hutt was probably no worse than the local imperial Moff, but at least the Moff maintained infrastructure and prevented total chaos. Was that better? Peter honestly didn't know. When they emerged into the upper levels, the contrast was shocking. Clean air, orderly traffic, buildings maintained and functional. People walking without fear, conducting business without weapons. The Empire's order, enforced by Vader and Palpatine's brutality, but order nonetheless. Back at the apartment, Peter stood at the viewport and tried to process what he'd seen. The miners he'd saved. The lower levels he'd escaped. Two very different faces of the same galaxy, places where the Empire's resources saved lives, and places where the Empire's absence created hell. His comm chimed. Peter activated it, expecting Corvus with tomorrow's schedule. Instead, a familiar distorted voice spoke. "Tomorrow night. Midnight. The coordinates I gave you. Come alone, or don't come at all. It's time you saw what the Empire does when they think no one's watching." Saw Gerrera. The rebel who'd contacted him days ago. Peter looked at the calendar display. Tomorrow was the scheduled day. He'd see whatever Saw wanted to show him, then he'd observe the rebel operation Corvus had planned, and after that he'd investigate a terrorist bombing. 3 more data points in this impossible equation. But his spider sense was building towards something. Not immediate danger, but a recognition that he was approaching a threshold. Soon, very soon, he'd have to stop observing and start acting. Stop gathering information and make a choice. And that choice would define what Spider-Man meant in a galaxy far, far away. Peter pulled out the web cartridges the Empire had given him. Studied them in the dim light. They'd helped him save 287 miners. They'd helped him protect ISB agents from gangs. They were tools, nothing more, but tools provided by a tyrannical regime that wanted to use him. Could he accept the Empire's resources while rejecting their philosophy? Could he save lives with their support without becoming complicit in their atrocities? Or was that just rationalization, the kind of moral compromise that destroyed you one good deed at a time? "Uncle Ben," Peter whispered to the empty apartment, "I really need your advice right now." But Uncle Ben was dead in another universe, and Peter was alone in this one. His spider sense pulsed once, not in warning, but in acknowledgement. Tomorrow night, he'd meet Saw Gerrera. He'd see what the rebellion wanted him to see. And then the real test would begin. Peter tried to sleep but couldn't. His mind kept replaying the day, the miners' desperate faces, the gang members he'd webbed up, the body he'd stepped over in the lower levels. 800 dead at Jagamir. Millions suffering in level 1313. The terrible mathematics of who got saved and who got abandoned. Around 0300, he gave up on sleep and spent the rest of the night doing the only thing that made sense, research. The apartment's computer terminal gave him access to the Imperial holonet, heavily censored, obviously, but still useful. He searched for information on the rebellion, on the Empire's history, on the clone wars that had preceded this era. What he found was disturbing. The Empire hadn't always existed, it had risen from a democratic republic that collapsed during a massive civil war. The Jedi Order, which Vader had mentioned with such hatred, had been peacekeepers for thousands of years before being wiped out for alleged treason. The current Emperor, Palpatine, had orchestrated his rise to power through manipulation and war. But the rebellion's history was equally problematic. Bombings that killed civilians. Raids on supply depots that left colonies without food or medicine. A documented willingness to sacrifice innocent lives for strategic advantage. They claimed moral superiority while using tactics that would make most terrorists proud. Neither side was clean. Both had blood on their hands. Both believed their cause justified any cost. And Peter Parker, Spider-Man, friendly neighborhood hero, was caught between them, trying to figure out which blood he could bear to have on his own hands. Dawn came eventually, painting Coruscant's upper levels in false gold. Peter stood at the viewport, watching the city wake up, and made a decision. He would go tonight. He would meet Saw Gerrera. He would see what the rebellion wanted to show him. And then, regardless of what he saw, he would make his choice based not on what either side wanted, but on what his uncle had taught him: with great power comes great responsibility. Even if that responsibility meant standing alone. Even if it meant both sides would hate him. Even if it meant he'd never find his way home. Peter pulled on his mask, feeling its familiar weight settle over his features. Today he'd observe whatever Corvus had planned, probably more examples of Imperial efficiency and rebel chaos. Tonight he'd see Saw's truth. And tomorrow, the galaxy would discover what Spider-Man really was. Not an Imperial asset. Not a rebel sympathizer. But something else entirely. Something this galaxy had never seen before. His spider sense pulsed in agreement, and for the first time since arriving in this universe, Peter Parker smiled. Okay, he said to his reflection. Let's see what happens when someone refuses to play by your rules. The galaxy far, far away was about to learn that some heroes couldn't be controlled, couldn't be bought, and couldn't be broken. They could only be Spider-Man. Midnight on Coruscant's level 1782 felt like stepping into a different planet. Not as desperate as level 1313, but not as pristine as the upper levels. This was where working-class beings lived, where the city's infrastructure showed its age, where Imperial propaganda posters were torn and graffitied with rebel symbols. Peter had slipped away from his apartment using a ventilation shaft his spider sense had identified on day one. The tracking anklet Vader had given him was currently webbed to an automated cargo transport circling the upper levels, buying him a few hours before anyone noticed. He wore his full suit, mask in place, moving through shadows with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent years as a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. The coordinates Saw Gerrera had provided led to an abandoned factory, some kind of droid manufacturing facility that had been shut down years ago. Peter's spider sense guided him through rusted machinery and debris to a cargo lift that descended into the factory's sublevels. The moment he stepped off the lift, weapons clicked in the darkness. Hands up, a voice commanded. Slowly. Peter raised his hands, spider sense tracking 6 armed figures surrounding him. I'm here to meet Saw Gerrera. He invited me. Lights flared, blinding. When Peter's vision adjusted, he found himself facing a man who looked like war personified. Saw Gerrera was maybe 50, built like a fortress, with cybernetic implants covering portions of his body and a breathing apparatus that wheezed with each breath. His eyes were hard, calculating, and utterly uncompromising. Spider-Man, Saw said, his voice distorted by the apparatus. You came alone. Good. That shows either courage or stupidity. My people have been watching you since you arrived on Coruscant. We know about your rescue mission to Jagamir. We know about your trip to the lower levels. We know the Empire is trying to recruit you with their propaganda. It's not propaganda if it's true, Peter said carefully. I saw them save thousands of lives. Did you? Saw moved closer, his cybernetic leg whirring. Or did you see them save the lives they chose to save? Did you ask why those miners were working in unsafe conditions? Did you ask what happens to workers who try to organize for better safety standards? Did you ask how many accidents occur in Imperial-operated facilities every year because profit margins matter more than safety regulations? Peter's spider sense pulsed, not danger, but recognition. Saw was making valid points, questions Peter hadn't thought to ask. The Empire showed you their best face, Saw continued. Efficient rescue operations. Order maintained. Lives saved. But they didn't show you what that order costs. They didn't show you the beings who disappear for speaking against Imperial policy. They didn't show you the world stripped bare of resources to feed the war machine. They didn't show you what happens when order is valued above justice. Saw gestured to one of his people, who activated a holographic projector. Images filled the space, documents, recordings, evidence of Imperial atrocities. A peaceful protest on Gorman crushed by a landing Imperial cruiser, killing hundreds. Political prisoners tortured in ISB black sites. Entire species enslaved for Imperial construction projects. The destruction of commas, a peaceful world whose cities were burned to ash for refusing conscription. Peter's stomach turned as the images continued. Children in labor camps. Beings executed for minor infractions. Families torn apart by Imperial relocation programs that were barely disguised ethnic cleansing. This is the order you witnessed, Saw said quietly. Built on a foundation of suffering and death. The Empire doesn't save lives, Spider-Man. It decides which lives are worth saving and which are expendable. And anyone who opposes them falls into the expendable category. The rebellion kills civilians too, Peter said, his voice hollow. I saw the reports. Ryloth. Christophsis. Dozens of others. You bomb targets knowing innocents will die. Yes. Saw didn't flinch from the accusation. We do. And I won't insult your intelligence by pretending otherwise. War is ugly, Spider-Man. It kills the innocent and the guilty alike. But there's a difference between us and them, we fight to end oppression. They fight to maintain it. We kill accidentally or as tragic necessity. They kill systematically and call it policy. Peter wanted to argue, to point out that dead was dead regardless of motivation. But his spider sense was showing him something. Saw believed every word. This wasn't manipulation or recruitment propaganda. This was a man who'd seen too much suffering and decided that violence was the only answer. You want me to join the rebellion, Peter said. No, Saw's response surprised him. I want you to understand what you're choosing. The Empire offers you resources, order, and the ability to save lives within their system. But that system is built on exploitation and murder. You would be complicit in atrocities even as you save individuals. The rebellion offers you nothing but struggle and moral compromise. But we fight to end the system that creates the suffering you saw in the lower levels, in the mines, everywhere the Empire's boot presses down. Saw deactivated the hologram. You can't save everyone, Spider-Man. No one can. But you can choose which side of history you stand on. The side that maintains oppression through efficient brutality, or the side that fights oppression through necessary violence. Those aren't the only options, Peter said quietly. Yes, they are. Saw's breathing apparatus wheezed harder. I've been fighting the Empire since before it called itself the Empire. I've tried peaceful resistance, they massacred protesters. I've tried political opposition, they imprisoned my allies and executed them as traitors. I've tried building alternative communities, they burned them and called it anti-terrorism operations. Violence is the only language they understand. Peter's spider sense suddenly spiked, danger approaching fast. We have company. Imperial forces, closing in on this position. Saw's expression didn't change. I know. I expected them to track you eventually. My people have already evacuated. This meeting was worth the risk. He moved toward a side exit, then paused. One more thing, Spider-Man. The Empire will show you a rebel operation soon, they told you this already. They'll arrange for you to witness our terrorism firsthand, to solidify their narrative. But ask yourself this, why do they know about the operation in advance? Why do they let it proceed rather than stop it? Maybe the answer will show you what Imperial Order really means. Then Saw was gone, his people vanishing into tunnels that honeycombed the sublevel. Peter's spider sense tracked multiple Imperial units converging on the factory, stormtroopers, ISB agents, and something else. Something that made his danger sense scream. Vader. Peter ran for the cargo lift, but his spider sense showed him it was already occupied, stormtroopers riding it down. He pivoted, finding an auxiliary shaft and web-zipping upward just as the first Imperial units breached the sublevel. His spider sense guided him through the factory's interior, avoiding patrols, staying ahead of the search perimeter. He was 3 levels up when Vader's presence registered like a black hole in his danger sense. The Dark Lord had entered the factory, and his Force abilities were doing something Peter couldn't fully comprehend, searching, probing, hunting for Peter's signature in the Force he didn't possess. Peter burst through a corroded wall and emerged onto a platform overlooking the factory floor. Below, hundreds of stormtroopers were conducting a systematic search. And standing at the center, a pillar of black armor and malice, was Vader. The Dark Lord's helmet turned upward, locking onto Peter's position with impossible precision. Spider-Man, Vader's voice carried across the factory. You were instructed not to contact rebel elements without supervision. This is a violation of our agreement. We didn't have an agreement, Peter called back. You imprisoned me and gave me a tracking anklet. That's not an agreement, that's house arrest. Semantics. Vader gestured, and Peter felt the Force grip him, pulling him down toward the factory floor. He webbed a support beam and resisted, his enhanced strength pitting against Vader's telekinesis. For a moment, neither gave ground. Then Vader's other hand came up, and Peter's webline snapped. He fell, tumbling through the air, spider sense screaming. He shot another webline at the last second, swinging wide to avoid the stormtroopers below, arcing toward an exit. Vader's lightsaber ignited, and suddenly there was no exit, just a glowing red blade blocking Peter's path. He twisted in midair, landed on a wall, and wall crawled desperately as Vader's blade carved through metal and stone like they were paper. You cannot escape, Vader stated. Surrender, and your defiance will be noted but forgiven. Resist, and you will be taken by force. Peter's mind raced. He couldn't fight Vader directly, the Dark Lord was too powerful, too skilled. But he didn't have to fight. He just had to escape. His spider sense showed him the layout, found weaknesses in the factory structure, identified a path through the stormtrooper cordon. He webbed a massive piece of machinery and yanked it loose. It toppled toward the stormtroopers, forcing them to scatter. In the chaos, Peter web-zipped to the ceiling, found a ventilation duct his spider sense identified as stable, and crawled inside. The duct led to an exterior exhaust port. Peter emerged onto the factory's roof, 300 meters above the street, and ran. His spider sense tracked Vader's presence below, moving with relentless purpose. TIE fighters screamed overhead, searchlights sweeping the rooftops. Peter jumped between buildings, swinging across gaps that would kill a normal person, using his spider sense to stay ahead of the Imperial net. He could feel Vader's frustration. The Dark Lord expected the Force to give him an advantage, but Peter's danger sense operated on different principles. It warned him of threats before they manifested, giving him an edge even Vader's precognition couldn't match. He lost the pursuit somewhere in the mid-levels, crawling into a maintenance shaft and webbing himself into a corner where the scanners couldn't find him. For an hour, he stayed motionless, barely breathing, listening to stormtrooper patrols pass meters away. When his spider sense finally indicated the search had moved on, Peter emerged and made his way back toward the upper levels. Not to his apartment, that would be watched now. Instead, he found a small hotel in a commercial district, paid cash from the credits Corvus had given him for incidentals, and collapsed onto the bed. His mind replayed Saw's words, the holographic evidence, the terrible choice being forced on him. The Empire saved lives but oppressed billions. The rebellion fought oppression but killed innocence. Neither side offered moral clarity, just varying shades of gray and the terrible responsibility of choosing which compromise you could live with. Peter's spider sense pulsed gently, and he realized someone was at the door. Not kicking it down, not announcing themselves, just knocking politely. He approached cautiously, spider sense ready. "Who is it?" "Commander Corvus," the familiar voice replied. "Alone. Unarmed. I need to talk to you, Spider-Man. Please." Peter's danger sense gave him all clear. He opened the door. Corvus stood there in civilian clothes, looking exhausted and 10 years older than this morning. He entered without invitation, moved to the window, and checked for surveillance before speaking. "Vader is furious," Corvus said quietly. "You escaped his pursuit and evaded Imperial tracking for 3 hours. That's unprecedented. Even Jedi couldn't manage it consistently." He turned to face Peter. "You met Saw Gerrera." "I know because I helped arrange it." Peter stared. "You what?" "I arranged it." Corvus sat down heavily. "Saw and I have been in periodic contact for years. We disagree on methods, but we agree on one thing: the Empire has become something neither of us can support. I wanted you to hear his perspective without Imperial supervision. To see evidence we're not permitted to acknowledge exists." "Why?" Peter's voice was barely a whisper. "You're an Imperial officer. Why would you betray your own side?" "Because I still believe in order. I still believe in preventing chaos. But I no longer believe the Emperor's methods serve that goal. I believe they perpetuate the very suffering they claim to prevent." Corvus looked at Peter with hollow eyes. "You asked me once if I believed in the Empire. The truth is, I believe in what the Empire should be. Not what it is." Peter sank into a chair, mind reeling. "What are you asking me to do?" "Nothing. Yet." Corvus stood. "Tomorrow, Vader will take you to observe the rebel operation we discussed. It's a raid on an Imperial supply depot. What Vader won't tell you is that we've known about it for weeks. We've evacuated critical supplies and positioned troops to maximize rebel casualties. It's a trap designed to show you how futile and costly rebel operations are. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to make your choice with complete information. Not Imperial propaganda. Not rebel romanticism. Just the truth." Corvus moved toward the door. "After tomorrow, Vader will demand you commit. Join the Empire or be imprisoned. That's when you'll have to decide who you are in this galaxy. Choose wisely, Spider-Man. Because both sides are watching, and neither will forgive neutrality much longer." Then Corvus was gone, leaving Peter alone with the crushing weight of impossible choices. Tomorrow, he'd watch rebels die in an Imperial trap. Then he'd be forced to choose. But Peter was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, the right choice wasn't picking a side. Maybe the right choice was refusing to play their game at all. His spider sense pulsed in acknowledgement, and somewhere in his exhausted mind, a plan began to form. A plan that would satisfy neither Empire nor rebellion. A plan that would make him an enemy of both. But a plan that would let him be Spider-Man. And that was all that mattered. The Imperial Supply Depot was located in Coruscant's industrial sector, massive warehouses filled with weapons, armor, medical supplies, and equipment destined for military operations across the Outer Rim. Peter stood on a rooftop 200 meters away, watching through macro binoculars as Vader briefed him on the situation. "Rebel intelligence believes this depot houses experimental weapons components," Vader explained, his mechanical breathing steady and calm. "They plan to infiltrate, plant explosives, and destroy the facility. What they do not know is that we relocated those components 3 days ago and replaced them with decoys. The depot is now a trap. Peter's spider sense was screaming. Below, he could see the rebel team moving into position, 8 beings in dark clothing, carrying demolition charges and weapons. They moved with disciplined precision, using scanner jammers and stealth fields to avoid detection. They were professionals, not terrorists. Soldiers fighting a war they believed in. And they were about to die. How many Imperial forces are positioned inside? Peter asked quietly. 4 platoons. Approximately 160 personnel. Vader gestured to hidden positions around the depot. Additional units are stationed in adjacent buildings. The moment the rebels breach the facility, all exits will be sealed and they will be eliminated. Clean, efficient, and with minimal collateral damage. Minimal to you means 8 dead rebels. 8 fewer terrorists conducting future operations. 8 fewer beings who will kill Imperial personnel. Vader turned to face Peter. You have observed both sides now. You have seen the Empire's capacity for humanitarian action and order maintenance. You have seen the rebellion's capacity for violence and futility. It is time to choose, Spider-Man. Will you serve the Empire, or will you be imprisoned as a security risk? Peter's hands clenched on the macro binoculars. His spider sense was tracking the rebel team. They'd reached the depot's entrance, were bypassing security systems, moving inside. They had maybe 3 minutes before the trap closed. What if I choose neither? Peter said. There is no neither. Neutrality is a luxury this galaxy cannot afford. You possess abilities of significant strategic value. You will serve one side or be prevented from serving the other. Those are your only options. Below, the rebels had planted their charges. They were retreating toward the exit, mission apparently successful. Peter's spider sense showed him Imperial forces moving into position, sealing escape routes, preparing to spring the trap. And in that moment, watching 8 people about to die for their beliefs, knowing the Empire had manipulated this entire operation to prove a point, Peter Parker made his choice. I choose option 3, he said. Then he jumped. His spider sense guided him through a perfect arc, swinging on web lines between buildings, dropping toward the depot at terminal velocity. Vader's shout followed him down, but Peter wasn't listening anymore. He crashed through a skylight, glass exploding around him, landing in the middle of the depot just as the rebel team reached the main entrance. Trap! Peter shouted. It's a trap, get out now. The rebels spun toward him, weapons raised. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Peter's spider sense exploded and he was moving, webbing the nearest exit door shut just as stormtroopers tried to breach it. His spider sense showed him the tactical situation, Imperial forces surrounding the building, heavy weapons positioning, all exits compromised. Except one. A maintenance shaft on the depot's north wall, too small for the Imperials to watch effectively. His spider sense had identified it from the rooftop. Follow me. Peter webbed another door, then a third, buying seconds. North wall, maintenance shaft, move. Who the hell are you? One of the rebels demanded. Someone who's sick of both sides treating lives like chess pieces. Peter grabbed 2 rebels and physically threw them toward the north wall. Move or die, your choice. His spider sense screamed danger and he rolled left as the sealed door exploded inward. Stormtroopers poured through, blaster fire filling the depot. Peter webbed their weapons, yanked them from their hands, created chaos in their formation. The rebels were running now, following his directions, trusting this insane stranger because the alternative was certain death. Peter's spider sense showed him Vader landing in the depot's center, lightsaber ignited. The Dark Lord moved with terrible purpose, cutting through Peter's webs like they were paper. Stop! Vader's voice echoed through the facility. You are protecting terrorists. I'm protecting people. Peter webbed a stormtrooper to the ceiling, then another to the floor. There's a difference. The rebels reached the maintenance shaft. One of them, a young Twi'lek woman, looked back at Peter with something like awe. "Come with us." "Can't. Someone has to slow them down." Peter webbed a massive storage container and yanked it down, creating a barrier between the rebels and their pursuers. "Tell Saw Gerrera that Spider-Man doesn't take sides in other people's wars." Then Vader was on him, lightsaber swinging in deadly arcs. Peter's spider sense was a constant shriek, guiding him through impossible dodges, showing him fractional second windows to avoid strikes that would have bisected him. He couldn't counterattack, couldn't touch Vader without losing a limb to that plasma blade, but he could evade. "You have chosen your path," Vader stated, his strikes relentless. "You are now an enemy of the Empire." "I'm not your enemy." Peter webbed a support beam and swung over Vader's head. "I'm just not your weapon." "There's a difference." "No. There is not." Vader's hand came up and the Force slammed into Peter like a physical wall. He crashed through storage containers, pain exploding through his ribs, his spider sense screaming damage warnings. He tried to rise but Vader's telekinetic grip pinned him to the ground. "You had the opportunity to serve order," Vader said, approaching slowly. "Instead, you chose chaos. You chose to protect terrorists who murder innocents. This is what your heroism amounts to, Spider-Man, enabling atrocities while claiming moral superiority." Peter struggled against the invisible pressure, his enhanced strength insufficient against the Force's power. "Those rebels weren't hurting anyone. You set them up to kill them, just to prove a point to me. They are soldiers in a war. Soldiers die. That is the nature of conflict." Vader's lightsaber pointed at Peter's chest. "Your interference has accomplished nothing except marking you as an enemy combatant. The Emperor will be disappointed." Peter's spider sense suddenly pulsed, not danger to him, but danger to Vader. Something was wrong. He focused his enhanced senses and realized what his danger sense was telling him: the rebel demolition charges were still active. They'd planted them throughout the depot before Peter arrived, and in the chaos of the fight, no one had disarmed them. The timer read, 0:47. "Vader," Peter gasped. "The bombs. They're still." "I am aware." Vader's tone didn't change. "The blast will be contained within the depot's reinforced structure. Your interference will end here. There are still stormtroopers inside. Your own people. Acceptable losses." And in that moment, staring up at Vader's expressionless mask, hearing those two words spoken with absolute cold certainty, Peter understood what he was really fighting against. Not just the Empire's tyranny, but its willingness to sacrifice anyone and anything in service of its goals. Even its own soldiers were expendable if their deaths served the Emperor's purpose. The timer hit 0:30. Peter made his choice. He stopped struggling against Vader's Force grip and instead went with it, using his enhanced strength to push in the direction Vader was pulling. The unexpected cooperation threw off Vader's concentration for a fraction of a second, long enough for Peter to break free. He web-zipped toward the nearest stormtroopers, grabbing them and physically hurling them toward the exits. "Evacuate!" Peter shouted. "Everyone out, bombs." 0:20. The stormtroopers didn't question, didn't hesitate, they ran. Years of training overrode confusion, and they followed Peter's warning. Vader stood motionless, watching Peter work with what might have been curiosity or contempt or nothing at all. 0:10. Peter grabbed the last two troopers and threw them through a window, then web-zipped after them. Behind him, he heard Vader's mechanical breathing, still inside the depot, still refusing to retreat. 0:05. Peter landed outside, rolled, covered his head. The explosion was massive. The depot's reinforced walls contained most of the blast, but the force still threw Peter 30 meters, slamming him into a building hard enough to crack his ribs. Through ringing ears and blurred vision, he watched the depot collapse in on itself, flames and smoke billowing into Coruscant's artificial sky. For a terrifying moment, Peter thought Vader had stayed inside, thought the Dark Lord had let himself die rather than show weakness by evacuating. Then a dark figure emerged from the flames, cape smoldering, armor scorched, but walking steadily through destruction that should have killed anyone else. Vader approached where Peter lay struggling to breathe, every rib screaming agony. The Dark Lord stood over him, silent for a long moment. "You saved Imperial lives," Vader finally said. "Even after declaring yourself an enemy." "Why?" Peter coughed, tasting blood. "Because, they're people. Doesn't matter what uniform they wear." "Interesting." Vader's helmet tilted slightly. "You are either the most noble being I have encountered, or the most foolish. Perhaps both." He turned to the stormtroopers who'd survived, 16 of them, watching this exchange with confusion. "Take him to the detention level. Medical treatment first, then maximum security. The Emperor will decide his fate." As stormtroopers hauled Peter to his feet, his spider sense tracked the rebel team escaping through Coruscant's lower levels. They'd made it. All 8 of them. Because Peter had warned them, had bought them time, had refused to let Vader's trap succeed. He'd also saved 16 Imperial soldiers who would continue serving an oppressive regime. Soldiers who might kill rebels in future battles. The mathematics were impossible, every life he saved potentially cost other lives down the line. But Peter couldn't think that way. Couldn't treat people as numbers in some cosmic equation. He could only be Spider-Man, save who he could save, help who he could help, and accept that sometimes the right choice had no good outcomes. In the Imperial transport, surrounded by stormtroopers and on his way to a detention cell, Peter closed his eyes and thought about Uncle Ben. About great power and great responsibility. About the choice he'd just made to be an enemy of everyone rather than a tool for anyone. He'd destroyed whatever chance he'd had at going home. The Empire had been his best hope for accessing dimensional technology, and now Palpatine would either break him or kill him. The rebellion might appreciate what he'd done, but Saw Gerrera wasn't stupid, he'd know Peter had also saved Imperial lives. Neither side could trust him now. Peter Parker was alone in a hostile galaxy, with every major faction viewing him as a threat. And somehow, despite the pain and the fear and the crushing knowledge that he might never see home again, Peter found himself smiling behind his mask. Because he was still Spider-Man. Still trying to save everyone, even when it was impossible. Still refusing to compromise his principles, even when compromise was the logical choice. Still believing that with great power came great responsibility, not to the Empire, not to the rebellion, but to every living being who needed help. The Empire would try to break him. The rebellion would try to recruit him. Both would learn what Peter Parker had known since the day a radioactive spider bit him. Some heroes can't be controlled. Can't be used. Can't be turned into weapons. They can only be themselves. And that, in a galaxy far, far away, in the middle of an impossible war, facing enemies on all sides, that would have to be enough. The detention cell in the Imperial Palace was everything Peter expected, sterile, silent, and designed to break the spirit of anyone imprisoned within. 4 walls of reinforced durasteel, a single bunk, no windows, and constant surveillance. He'd been here for 3 days, ribs wrapped in medical bandages, spider sense providing a low hum of ambient danger that never quite faded. They'd taken his web shooters. His mask. Left him with only the underlayer of his suit. But they couldn't take what mattered, his powers, his principles, and his stubborn refusal to become what either side wanted him to be. On the 4th day, the cell door opened. Not Vader. Not Corvus. Emperor Palpatine himself entered, flanked by 2 royal guards who remained at the threshold. Peter stood, ignoring the pain in his ribs, meeting those yellow eyes without flinching. Remarkable, Palpatine rasped, circling Peter slowly. For days in maximum security, facing execution or worse, and still you radiate defiance. Most beings break in hours. You, young Spider-Man, grow more resolute. The Emperor's withered hand gestured almost admiringly. You saved Imperial soldiers while protecting rebel terrorists. You attacked Lord Vader while warning him of danger. You are a walking contradiction, and contradictions fascinate me. I'm not a contradiction, Peter said quietly. I'm just someone who doesn't think lives should be spent like currency. Ah, but they should. They must. Palpatine settled into a chair that hadn't been there moments before, conjured by servants so silent Peter's spider sense barely registered them. You possess a child's morality, Spider-Man, everyone must be saved, no one is expendable. It is touching. It is also catastrophically naive. You cannot save everyone, so you must choose. And your choice, to save both sides at the cost of serving neither, is simply another form of cowardice disguised as principle. Peter's hands clenched. You sent Vader to trap those rebels just to manipulate me. You used them as bait. Who's the coward? I am pragmatic. You are sentimental. One of us rules a galaxy. The other sits in a cell awaiting judgment. Palpatine's smile was a razor. But I did not come to debate philosophy. I came to offer you one final choice, the only real choice you have remaining. Serve me, and your unique gifts will save millions. Your danger sense could prevent disasters, assassinations, rebellions before they coalesce. You would be invaluable. Refuse, and I will ensure your gifts serve no one. I will study your physiology until I understand your abilities completely, then replicate them in beings loyal to the Empire. You will spend your remaining years as an experimental subject, conscious for every moment, until there is nothing left to learn. Then, and only then, will I grant you the mercy of death. Peter's spider sense was screaming, showing him the truth of Palpatine's words. This wasn't a bluff. The Emperor would do exactly what he promised, without hesitation or remorse. There's a third option, Peter said, forcing his voice steady. Oh. Palpatine's amusement was genuine. Do enlighten me. You keep me imprisoned, study me if you want, but I don't break and I don't serve. I just exist as a reminder that your empire can't control everything. That some people refuse to choose between your tyranny and the rebellion's chaos. That there are other ways to. Palpatine's laughter cut him off, wet, rasping, utterly delighted. Magnificent. You truly believe you can simply endure. That your moral fortitude will sustain you through years of torture and experimentation. Oh, child, you have no conception of the dark side's capacity for inflicting suffering. I could keep you in agony for decades, lucid enough to feel every moment, and still extract the information I require. Your endurance is meaningless against the power of the Force. Lightning crackled between Palpatine's fingers, and Peter's spider sense detonated in warning. But he didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there and met the Emperor's terrible gaze. Then do it, Peter said quietly. Torture me. Study me. Spend years trying to break me. But you should know something, back in my universe, I've fought gods. I've been beaten, broken, killed and brought back. I've lost everything and everyone I loved and still kept going. Because that's what Spider-Man does. We don't give up. We don't compromise. We just keep fighting, no matter what. So go ahead, Emperor. See which lasts longer, your patience or my principles. The lightning faded. Palpatine studied Peter with an expression that might have been respect or might have been something far more dangerous. You are either the bravest fool I have encountered, the Emperor said slowly, or you are something I have not seen in many years, someone who genuinely believes their own rhetoric. Either way, you present a fascinating problem. He stood, servants materializing to remove the chair. I will not torture you, Spider-Man. Not yet. Instead, I will show you the cost of your neutrality. Palpatine gestured, and a holographic display activated, showing Coruscant's lower levels. Peter's enhanced vision recognized the location, near where he'd met Saw Gerrera, where thousands of beings lived in the Empire's neglect. In 6 hours, Imperial forces will conduct a security sweep of level 1782, Palpatine explained. We have intelligence suggesting Saw Gerrera's cell uses that region as a base of operations. The sweep will be thorough. Resistance will be met with overwhelming force. Civilians who harbor rebels will be designated enemy combatants. Conservative estimates suggest 3,000 casualties among the level's population. Peter's blood ran cold. You're going to massacre them. Because I helped those rebels escape. No, child. I am going to eliminate a rebel cell that threatens Imperial security. The casualties are simply an unfortunate consequence of their refusal to cooperate with lawful authority. Palpatine's smile widened. But you could prevent it. Serve me, and I will cancel the operation. Your first mission would be locating Saw Gerrera using your danger sense, allowing us to capture him without civilian casualties. Refuse, and those 3,000 deaths are on your conscience. The mathematics are simple: serve and save thousands, or maintain your principles while they die. Choose wisely. The cell door sealed behind the Emperor, leaving Peter alone with an impossible ultimatum and 6 hours to decide. His spider sense pulsed gently, acknowledging the trap's perfection. Palpatine had learned from previous failures: torture hadn't worked, recruitment hadn't worked. But weaponizing Peter's own compassion? That might succeed where force had failed. Peter sank onto the bunk, head in his hands, and tried to think through the horror. 3,000 people would die because he'd refused to choose sides. But if he served Palpatine to save them, how many more would die from operations he'd enable? How many rebels would he help capture? How many disasters would he help the Empire navigate while they maintained their oppressive regime? With great power comes great responsibility. But what was responsibility when every choice led to death? Peter closed his eyes and thought about Uncle Ben, about Aunt May, about every person he'd saved back home. He thought about the miners on Jagamir, the stormtroopers he'd saved at the depot, the rebels he'd warned. He thought about Darth L, dead because Vader didn't value mercy. He thought about Commander Corvus, trapped in a system he couldn't escape. And slowly, painfully, Peter realized something that changed everything. He couldn't stop the Empire alone. Couldn't defeat Palpatine or Vader or the massive Imperial war machine. But he also couldn't serve them, couldn't become complicit in their atrocities, couldn't compromise his principles even to save lives in the short term. Which meant there was only one option left. The option he'd been avoiding because it terrified him more than torture or death. He had to escape. Had to get free of both Empire and Rebellion. Had to find a way to help this galaxy on his own terms, outside their war, refusing their false choices. It was impossible. The Imperial Palace was the most secure facility in the galaxy. He had no web shooters, no equipment, no allies. His spider sense showed him hundreds of guards, automated defenses, and Vader himself somewhere in the massive structure. But Peter Parker had never let impossible stop him before. He stood, testing his body's limits. The ribs were healing, his enhanced physiology worked fast. He was at maybe 70% capacity. Not ideal, but Spider-Man had saved the day with worse. His spider sense began mapping the detention level, cataloging guard rotations, identifying weak points in the facility's structure. It would take time, patience, and perfect timing. Peter had 6 hours before 3,000 people died. He'd better start now. As he began planning his escape, the most dangerous thing he'd ever attempted, Peter allowed himself one small, defiant smile. The Empire thought they'd trapped him. The Rebellion thought he was lost. Both believed he'd have to choose their side eventually. Neither understood that Spider-Man's greatest power wasn't his strength or his spider sense or his genius. It was his refusal to accept no-win scenarios. Somewhere in the Imperial Palace, Emperor Palpatine felt a ripple in the Force, something unexpected, something that tasted of determination and reckless hope. His smile faded slightly as he realized the Spider-Man might not break as easily as anticipated. And somewhere in Coruscant's depths, Saw Gerrera received a coded message from Commander Corvus: "The spider moves at midnight. Be ready to catch him." The galaxy far, far away was about to learn what happened when you tried to cage a hero who'd spent his entire life refusing to be controlled. You didn't get a weapon. You didn't get an ally. You got chaos, hope, and someone who would fight both sides to save anyone who needed saving. You got Spider-Man. And the Empire, the Rebellion, the entire galaxy, would never be the same. May the Force be with you. More stories await.